Everybody has a story, and we aim to reveal the most impactful experiences of our guests that our listeners can learn and grow from. American Premium Vodka is a proud partner that helps make this show possible. Please enjoy this episode of the Blueprint Banter. Well, I am Derek Lyons, your host of the Blueprint Banter, and with me today is John Krusenstjerna, owner of CTS Cleaners, Marine vet, dude that has probably some of the most energy and just fucking grinder mentality of anyone I've ever met. Always on the go. We were just talking about it actually before we got started, and we'll dive into that more. But thanks for coming on, dude.
Absolutely.
We don't have
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we don't have to like treat it as a full radio show, but I always think the intro is fairly important to let people know we're getting kicked off, I guess. But I think we can just start by talking a little bit like, you know, we'll dive into your past a little bit, but currently right now, like, can you just describe to us what is CTS Cleaners? What's that look like? Just kind of briefly from you as an owner and just the day-to-day to that.
Oh, wow. We're diving into a lot here. CTS Cleaners is a company I developed back in 2009. I saw the need for cleaning up crime scenes out of the Des Moines market or the Des Moines area. And from there, I kind of went statewide with it just because in the beginning stages, people think of crimes and it's like, well, there's not a whole lot of crime here. This isn't Chicago. This isn't San Francisco, LA, Denver, places like that, New York. And so I kind of branched out to the whole state, kind of bit off, I think, a little more than I could chew at times. And from there, just, 15 years later, we're still hooking and jabbing, and went from our first year was 27 projects to now we have over 600 a year, and so those can be anything from little blood cleanups, and it's not just crimes either. We handle what we call unattended deaths. Someone dies in a house, no one talked to mom or dad or their aunt for a week, 2 weeks, and they've got the heat on at 80 degrees and 2 dogs and a cat in there, and it creates quite the mess. To, of course, the whole taboo thing of suicides. Nobody really wants to talk about that. We handle a couple of those, 2, 3, 4 of those a week. So it's a real thing. We got called yesterday for a fish tank full of human feces and in a motel room. And so they're like, yeah, we need this removed. And so it's just like,
I'm not sure how one even gets to that point, I guess. But
yeah, I'm like, who's crapping in a fish tank?
Yeah.
And
do you ever get to hear any of the backstory, some of the stuff you get called on? I mean, just is like maybe through your relationships with the PD or whatever?
We do. We have a lot of relationships with whether it's law enforcement and first responders and even just simply like project or the property managers. And so, for instance, one day we were doing a clean out on an apartment. There was just some other debris that needed to be removed, and the facilities maintenance director walks up and he's like, yeah, this guy, he was killed out there in the parking lot, got hit by lightning. And he's like, here's his umbrella that he had in his hand. And it was like, oh shit, like the umbrella's fried. I'm like, first off, why did you guys even bring this back to this guy's apartment? Like, just walked it up the building. Secondly, it's like, I would have just thrown that thing right in the dumpster. Like, he wouldn't have needed it. And didn't you know at the time that the guy was dead? Like, but obviously he wasn't dead. He got transported by medics, and they're like, well, hey, we're gonna get his junk umbrella back up to his apartment so he can use tomorrow or whatever. But it was just like, wow, that's like shocking. Like, no pun intended. It's just like, some weird stuff that you hear these backstories on, and it's so incredible, like how many different stories we hear, like literally every day that they fall off. Like you can't even amount to put them in your head.
Well, and I suppose to your point that you sort of led off with, like maybe not even understanding the full grasp of how many events each year in the state of Iowa that you would come across. I mean, there are just some bizarre and different ways that do you deal with? I mean, is it always like death related, or is it sometimes just like if someone gunshot wound and they maybe don't die, but you still have to clean up the bodily fluid?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do it all. So all sorts of blood. We've had it in a pretty high end law firm that they had one of the partners had a bloody nose, went to the bathroom, sneezed. It looked like a gunshot suicide in there. It was blood everywhere. It was like, wow, this guy had some blood clots going on that he just dispersed all throughout this countertop and on the floor, the mirror. It was like, oh my gosh,
Wow.
and it was kind of funny when they got the bill, because they weren't super impressed with the cost of it. But it's like, hey, you guys charge us like $100 more an hour for your services. Like, we're in there cleaning up blood. Like, you guys didn't want to do it. That's why you guys called us. So don't complain about that. But it's it could be everything from stuff that happens in a bathroom, in a retail center or a mall, that someone leaves a colostomy bag and their janitors are like, oh, that's disgusting, we're not touching that. And I'm like, come on, throw some gloves on, red bag it, let's just get it out of there. It's not a big deal. Like, we even go as far as like cleaning and applying a disinfectant to that area, and then it's like, hey, this area is super clean, like way better than what anyone else would have done. Or if that person just set that colostomy bag on the ground, more than likely they didn't do it on purpose. They probably just forgot it. Same with needles. A lot of people are diabetic and have, insulin dependent through needles. And so they might just leave it on the counter at, some 30-story office building. And all of a sudden someone walks in and freaks out. Oh my gosh, someone's shooting up heroin in here. And it's like, so we get called in and it's like, no, this is an insulin syringe. Like, someone just probably, instead of putting it in the sharps container, they forgot about it. We'll pick it up. We'll dispose of it. No harm, no foul. Not a big deal. So there's a lot of things that aren't, death related.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose, like, to the average person that, your mind is maybe going to go to like some of those extremes, and maybe like take a minute and just think about it. And like, is it really that big a deal to grab it and throw it away? But on the contrary to that, I suppose there's times where, and we can just kind of dive into it a little bit, but if it is a crime scene, or if there is a death or whatever, there has to be a certain element to like the legal side of things where things can't be touched or whatever too, right? So, I'm sure you deal with some of that as well.
We deal with that. I would say half a dozen times a year do we find what could be, potentially evidence on cases. Our staff are trained in recognizing what is potentially evidence. Always take, the safe side and let's call it in. Let's, whether it was, Des Moines Police Department or investigating it, or Division of Criminal Investigation, whoever's, kind of investigating, let's give them a call and just say, hey, we found, a shell casing, or we found a knife with some blood on it, or a piece of metal with blood on it that potentially might have been like the weapon.
Have you had any instances like that where you ended up having to like give a deposition?
Oh, absolutely. I've had to testify like half a dozen times in court, and these are for homicides. And, it's kind of a little bit intimidating when you're in deposition and you've got this person that just killed two people, literally like closer than you and me. And I'm one of the ones that can be, not to say that me finding a bullet is the last nail in the coffin to put them away, but they're staring at me like, why are you talking? Yeah. And why was that even something that you even decided to bring up? And it's just like, it's pretty intimidating knowing like this is a real bad person.
It's interesting that they even allow the possibility of intimidation to like deter somebody to testify though,
yes.
too, or not testify, but at least be deposed like under that sort of pressure.
Yeah. Well, and that, like, in the one deposition, they sat there and they asked me, you got the state's attorneys and then you've got this defendant's attorneys, and they're like, do you know this person? And obviously I got to look up at him to be like, no, I'm not just going to look at the table and not make eye contact or not look. And it's just like, no, I don't know this person. Like, you've never met this person. I said, no, I've never met this person, never seen this person a day in my life. So for them to, if they were to say, oh, you knew this guy, and then they're trying to obviously plant some information or seed something out there to be like, oh, well, he didn't like him or her, and this guy went and it's like, but for these things they're so far off. But what some of these defense attorneys, they're grasping at straws, that littlest thing, to be like, oh, he met him at a gun range and pulled a shell casing that this defendant had used and planted it. And it's like,
Yeah, and I suppose any, even if they don't have a straw to grasp onto, but if they can get any evidence thrown out because of any of that stuff, then obviously that it improves their case or their chances at least. But do you have any specific examples that you can remember where, because I assume, or just maybe walk us through if it is a crime scene, and I think we can just like stay on this topic a little bit because I think it's extremely interesting. If it is a crime scene, I mean, is there has to be protocol, I assume, from law enforcement um, to get on the scene, like before you guys do get involved, and then I suppose, what's that look like of when you get the okay to go on site, but then if you do find something that isn't marked or whatever, I mean, how does that whole deal kind of work?
Yeah, so generally on the law enforcement side, obviously if it's a crime or even suspected to be a crime, even some suicides, they might not know. Maybe the gun is still being held in the person's left hand, and the spouse is like, no, they're right-handed. Why they use their left hand? Was this something staged or whatever? Obviously, law enforcement goes in, does all their photographs, the body gets removed, and then they do their documentation, and then they'll generally release it then back to the family, the property owner, whoever, and just say, hey, here you go. That's generally where we get brought in. Sometimes it's like instantaneously, we're still there right when law enforcement is leaving, kind of shake hands and we go in. There's sometimes that it's been left for 6 months and nobody goes in. But then our process to go in, we photo document everything. We have some written reports that we do, narratives about what we're entering, what we're seeing, what areas are affected, and kind of a little bit of a backstory, whether it was a shooting, a stabbing, stuff like that. And then we start cleaning up. But if we find anything that's evidence, and generally, like also in our intake call, we'll find out, was it a Des Moines PD case, West Des Moines PD case, a state patrol case, who was handling it, and then who is your point of contact. So like if you were to call me to say, hey, something bad happened to my house, I'm going to say, okay, who's the officer in charge. So then that way we have their information. So then that way if we do find something that we're instantly calling them, not having to call through some dispatch that they're going to drop the ball on relaying it to some detective, or maybe the detective isn't working day shift, maybe he's working night shift. Well, he might not call us back for 6 hours, and it's like, no, we need to know right now because we're tearing up this carpet, and if we find a bullet like the projectile or a casing, it's like we don't want to just throw it away because we don't know, is that something that could be pertinent to their investigation. There's, I'd say, probably 9 times out of 10 that we do get those. We get a phone call, we make a phone call, either they send someone out or they'll just say, hey, no, we got everything we need in this. Like, we don't need any more. Like, if you guys just want to dispose of it, you guys can dispose of it. So then we also document, who we talked to, the time, like their badge number, PIN number, ident number, whatever they're using, so then that way if someone else comes back on us and says, well, who the hell gave you authorization to throw that shell casing away? We're going to say, well, Detective Smith, his badge number is 123. He said at 1614 on 1127 that we can dispose of that. So that way we're documenting and covering our rear too, because that's the last thing we want to do is, obviously someone else made a mistake or overlooked something, but then they'll pin it on us if we do something wrong, and we can't just, 2 wrongs don't make a right. And
How did you, is it fair to say that there's not many businesses like yours in the state of Iowa?
yeah,
Not to like give your competitors a shout out necessarily.
Yeah, right. Yeah, shout out to everybody. There's a couple that specifically deal with what we deal with. However, we hold ourselves on a much higher level. We're a member of the American Biorecovery Association, which is kind of like the top tier. It's a third-party credentialing service, so they test us on our knowledge in the industry, not just like like in anything else. You can go do an online certification course and you get certified through, Bob the Builder. It says how to build houses, but then if you get accredited by an international association that comes in and tests you after the fact and says, hey, what do you really know about building houses? Test you on their syllabus, then that's a whole different thing. And so we have that. We're the only company in the state of Iowa that holds that accreditation. And what I try to tell people is, if you're looking at you got 2 competition or competing companies putting a bid on the project, and they're both similar in price, it's like, go for the one that has a higher standard.
Yeah.
You know, why wouldn't you? It's like if I'm going to get a flu shot and I've got a doctor or a nurse in training, it's like, well, the doctor's been doing this for 40 years. He's going to give me my shot just right.
Yeah, especially if they have the same access to the same education and information that you do. I mean,
Oh, exactly.
It's, you know, it's a fair playing field. What I mean, I guess I'm interested. Back in, you said 2009 was when you started it. I mean, what? And I think we'll back up a little bit further and kind of maybe go through your military background and then getting out of the service and all that stuff. But just in that moment, I guess, because it's not a well-known business. I mean, there's a lot of people that are like, he does what? You know, when we're talking about John K. But I mean, what kind of like opened your eyes to the fact that there was a need for a specialty business that does that? Or was there another business that was sort of doing it but was incapable or maybe not? I mean, what did that look like, I guess?
Yeah. It's kind of loaded there. So yeah, I kind of started out when I was in the military. We were building combat outposts in Ramadi, Iraq, and we came across some dead bodies. And it was kind of, at the time, if we took hostile fire, say you shot at us, we shot back at you, killed you, we would document all this, GPS coordinates, everything, reports, body bag your body, take you. They had an old potato factory that we would take all the bodies to, and then they had mortuary affairs people there that would figure out, you know, who you really are based off of your identification you have. If you don't, you know, then they put you in another pile of bodies, and hopefully someone will come say, yeah, that's my brother, sister,
The
dad.
enemy.
Yeah, yep.
Hold on a second. So let's just dive into this.
Yeah.
Like when you're in the military, active, like you go kinetic on a mission, whatever, like in that scenario, you would have to then, like, once things calm down, go retrieve the bodies?
So within reason. Like if we shoot you and you're running, we're not going to chase your blood trail like deer hunters and try to hope to find you at the river drinking water. But if you drop dead right there, then we've because now you're not a combatant. So now you're wounded. And so we've got to, you know, tend to you. And so like even our medics, if we shot you, we had a guy driving a car, wouldn't stop for us. And one of our guys shot at him and hit him in the neck. And he's just bleeding profusely. I hate to laugh about it, but we gave him a couple Band-Aids, and they were Snoopy Band-Aids because like all these little kids would like send us care packages, and they were like, here's some Band-Aids in case you get shot. And we're like, yeah, great. You know, we give them to our doc or corpsman and say, you know, hey man, here's a bunch of Band-Aids because I'm not going to use 100 Band-Aids for anything. But yeah, I just remember they put a bunch of Band-Aids on them because we still got to, you know, care for them now because they're not a combatant against us.
Well, maybe it does us better to explore this side of it first then, because that was a super loaded question about CTS, and I just it's an extremely interesting business, obviously, to be in, and I think it takes a special character to want to be a part of a business like that. It's extremely necessary business and an extremely necessary profession, but I think it's safe to say that, holy shit, you see a lot of things, right? So
you see a lot.
So let's and I want to like get more into that military side of things too, because Jesus, what led you to join the military to begin with? I mean, was it like one of those things that, what year was it? Like, can you give us a time frame?
Yeah. I mean, so I'd been out of high school for almost 2 years at the time, or like a year and a half. And one of my best friends at the time was joining the Marine Corps.
You graduated high school when?
I graduated in 2001 from Van Meter. And he had moved to Colorado, moved back to Iowa, or came back to Iowa for like winter break, and was like, I'm joining the Marine Corps. And my grandfather and my uncle were both Marines. And my other grandfather was in the Air Force. And so I kind of come from somewhat military, you know, in the family, enough to where my parents, I don't really think they wanted me to join. And this is 2000, this is like winter of 2002.
The peak of
war
on terror.
Like we're getting ready, United States was getting ready to go to war. It hadn't kicked off yet, but they were, you know, it was getting ready. And my good buddy's like, I'm going to join the Marines. And he didn't have a car, so I was like taking all his like recruiters appointments and stuff like that. And I was kind of just not really doing, like I was working for my parents' business at the time. I was mowing some yards, just doing some like just random stuff. Like school wasn't for me. I went to DMAC for a half a semester, like a year prior, and just was like phased out of that. I was like, I'm just not in it. Like, I'm not in it for school. And I just remember the recruiters always like trying to get me to join, like, hey, you know, come on and join, and you know, we can get you on, blah blah blah. You do whatever you want, and I'm like, nah, you know, I don't want to do that. And then all of a sudden, just one day, I was just like, you know what, like, I'm not really going anywhere. I had a little lawn care business, but clients weren't looking at me. They were looking at me as a kid, like a high school kid with a push mower. Like, I had commercial equipment, I had, you know, big trucks and plows and stuff like that, but they weren't looking at me like that. And so, like, for me to like sign bigger contracts and, you know, get bigger complexes and stuff like that, nobody was really looking at me for that. And so I was just like, I need to get away for a few years. And then it just like dawned on me. I'm like, you know what, screw this, I want to join the Marine Corps. So then I went with my buddy Gavin one day to the recruiter's office, and I'm like, hey, I want to go. And they were like, oh, sweet, you know, we can get you shipped out in like 6 months. I'm like, no, if I go, I'm going with him. And so they do a buddy program. So like the buddy program, you guys both go to boot camp together, and then depending on like your MOS, which is like your military job, then you can either get split up or you stay together. But I was like, yeah, I want to go with Gavin. And they were like, shit, that's like 11 days from now that he's shipping out. And I'm like, well, hey, do your magic, Marines.
Looks
Like,
like I
let's
leave in
figure
11
this
days.
out. Like, you got 11 days to figure this shit out. I don't know if we're going to do this. And next thing you know, like, I went, and I remember like going and doing my ASVAB, and I'd been up for like 24 hours straight plowing snow. This is in end of February, beginning of March. And I was like, shit, like, I'm going to go do this ASVAB thing. I'm in this room with like 20 other people taking this test. And all of a sudden, like, I don't even know how much time it was. It felt like 10 minutes, but then I'm done, and I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, fuck, I failed. Like, well, because I'm done and nobody else is done. Everyone's like using like scratch paper for stuff. And I'm like, I didn't even got to that part. Like, what the hell do they need scratch paper for? Like, what are they writing down? I'm like, shit, like, what did I'm like, this thing's already telling me, like, you've already fucked up so bad, like, from the start. Like, we're not even going to waste your time anymore, bud. I remember walking out, and I had an ASVAB score of 69. And I'm like, great. I'm like, that's just basically like my high school average, you know, like 70% are like all around. Well, it wasn't 69, wasn't like a percentage. I thought it was, but it wasn't. And then found out that I could pretty much do anything I wanted to in the Marine Corps. And they were like, pick out what you want to do.
You had the aptitude to.
Yeah. So I was like, holy shit. I was like, I guess this is really happening. And then I think it was about that time that then I told my parents, like, hey, I joined the Marine Corps.
Shit, your parents didn't know at any point.
No. Like,
Oh
I think they probably had like a week notice, maybe maybe 8 days. I mean, it wasn't like 6 months to like plan ahead or anything like that.
And again, just for anybody listening to this, I mean, you're talking about like late winter of 2023. So you're a year and a half basically removed from 9/11.
This is like beginning of 2023.
Yeah.
It's like February, March.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're a year and a half removed from 9/11.
Or 2003.
2003. Yeah. So, you know, 2001, September 2001, obviously shit goes down. And then like early 2003, I mean, to your point, I think there was some special forces stuff that happened really, really early on. But then like that's when shit's starting to get real in Afghanistan, right? So, I mean, it's not like, oh, I'm just going to go get some college paid for. I mean, you had to be going in with sort of the context of like, this could get
you're
real
going to go to war.
quick.
Yeah. And that's kind of the mindset I did have, like, when I went in, and I remember it was like end of the first week of boot camp that drill instructors all came in, and they were like pointing at kids, like, you have like all walks of life in there, but you don't know. And that's like the great thing of the Marine Corps, or like military in general. Like, I can't judge you like, oh, this guy wears cowboy boots and I want to wear Jordans, like, type of thing, to like be cliquish on who you want to hang out with. Like, the first like 4 hours you're there, everyone's head shaved, so you have no idea who's like rocking long hair, who's rocking a buzz cut. Like, everyone's got the same haircut, obviously no facial hair. You're wearing the same uniforms, but you could still kind of tell like who's a little timid, who's a little, more, hate to say nerdy, like in a timid way. But I remember drill instructors walking in like, what's your MOS? Like, what do you want to do in the Marine Corps? And like, kids are like, oh, I want to be administrative. I want to type on a computer. I want to do like film. I mean, there's all sorts of different, there's hundreds of jobs in the military.
All of it's necessary. Yeah.
And they were like, no, every single one of you guys are now grunts. You're all going to war. President Bush just, announced we're going to war, in Iraq. And everyone's like, oh shit. And there was like, I would say probably 90% of them in there are like cheering it on, like, yeah, I want to do this. And, it kind of goes back to like high school football and having practices and 2-a-days. Like, nobody wants to go through practice and work your ass off to not playing the game. And so like for me, like joining the Marine Corps, I'm like, that's like the world's like best fighting force. Like I don't want to join the Marine Corps and not fight. Like I don't want to just join it and then be on, be in the rear on the backside or whatever and not do anything. And but like my first deployment to Iraq was February.
Hold on a second. I want to get there, but just I want to add. I want to backfill with some more context too, because I suppose for those instructors, I mean, we had just come out of sort of a stagnant time through the mid to late 90s where there wasn't a lot of active combat stuff going on, right? So, I mean, of course, there were still people deployed in different areas of the world, but I mean, I could imagine, to that point of they were probably coming out of an era where there was just a lot of people going into the military to get college paid for, for whatever reason. And there was probably like a sense of urgency to make sure that they prepared people in the early stages of like, I want you guys to understand that this is fucking real, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, was there a feeling of that kind of from like leadership or?
You had a sense of it, but when I look back now, like then you looked at these drill instructors, I mean, and these, like, they're not all like what you see on like the cartoons of like Marines that are all like 230, just 6'2" and jacked, 3% body fat. A lot of these guys are little guys, but they've just got this like, their brains are just off. Like every Marine drill instructor, I mean, they're little pit bulls, and they can be very mean, but then they're just a normal guy when you get them out. I've got buddies that have been drill instructors, and it's like you get them out of, you take their campaign cover off and they're just another dude who wants to just hang out, drink beer and shoot the shit. But when we were in boot camp, like you had this mindset that these guys had already been there, even though looking back now, it's like none of those drill instructors had ever saw combat. And that came to a more realization when I got off my first deployment to Iraq. I came back here and I did recruiters assistance for 6 weeks where I helped out with their recruiters. And it was just kind of a way to get me home so I could see family and friends and stuff. But I still had to go in and work every day, wear my dress blues and go to schools and stuff like that and talk to people. And I remember a couple of the recruiters were calling me like the war hero because I came in, I had more medals and ribbons. Well, we were wearing our ribbons. I had more ribbons than all but like the top guy in the recruiting station, just because he had been in for like 18 years in the Marine Corps, where these other recruiters, usually they were in for like 5-6 years they'd been in the Marine Corps, but none of them had been anywhere to see combat. Like, yeah,
and to no fault of their own. It was just
it's just a timing thing. Yeah. And it's just whenever you joined and what you got the opportunity to go on. But, I'm sitting here with more ribbons on my chest than the rest of them. And they were kind of, just bantering, giving me shit about it. But,
again, like I want to make sure we just cover a little bit more of the backstory before we get to your first deployment. But so you insane that you're just like, I'm going to do this. And your buddy ships out in 11 or 12 days or whatever you said. When you have that conversation with your parents, what was that like?
Honestly, I don't really remember it being much more than, hey, I joined the Marine Corps and I'm leaving on this day.
And they probably
like, it was not a like, hey, mom and dad, let's sit down and let's talk about this, because that was never the type of person I ever was. It was just, I'm going. I've already signed the contract, So it's like, there's nothing you can do to change this. There's nothing, that's gonna. We've got a contract with the government now, basically for my body. It's like I'm shipping out on, I think it was the 17th of March.
What was the when you did sign up and you signed your name or whatever? Did you have an intent of what you wanted to do in the Marine Corps at that time? Do you sort of select, or how does that work?
Yeah, you can. I know. I mean, because there's so many different career fields that you can go into. I mean, obviously grunt and machine gunner and assaultman and demolitions guys and stuff like that. I went in. I wanted to drive heavy equipment. Like I wanted to be a bulldozer operator. I was just like, I had friends that were doing that back here, and I'm like, hell, you could drive a bulldozer in the Marine Corps and then get out and maybe have some experience to go work for another company or something. I mean, I'm definitely didn't want to do anything that was like administrative or supply or anything like that. I was just like, I can't sit behind a desk all day. I already knew that at 20 years old that I wouldn't be able to do any of that stuff. But I don't remember, like, you get like 3 picks. I don't remember what my first pick was. Ultimately, I ended up getting truck mechanic. I think that was my third pick, to be honest. I think my first pick was like heavy equipment operator, and then like combat vehicle logistics, like being a truck driver, but driving like Humvees and stuff, because it's like that's what you see in like the commercials, like the Humvees like blasting through, blasting through the desert. And you got a machine gunner up there, and they're blowing shit up and stuff. I'm like, I want to be doing that. And
So what is boot? So you go through that. Tell your parents you're leaving. You ship out. And then you sort of told us what it was like when you first got there. But what does that next time period look like before you guys do ship out? And like, what is that from a preparation standpoint? Like, what's that look like, feel like while you're there? Kind of the build up to your first deployment.
There's a lot actually between like boot camp and then going to that deployment. Like, so you go through 13 weeks of boot camp combat, and then after that you've got another like 3 weeks of Marine Corps combat training. So you learn how to more shoot bigger guns and do random stuff, combat related. And then from there you go to your MOS school. So like I shipped out to North Carolina for a few months to learn how to turn wrenches on trucks. And that was like the most like Barney style shit you could learn. I mean, it was like those vehicles, and if you could read a schematic and say follow wire 102 to wherever it goes over here, stupid easy.
They're intentionally set up to be simple.
They are very simple.
Yeah.
Very simple. And you kind of laugh because there's guys that like fell out of that shit. And it's like, how did you do this? Like, you can't, like, we're asking you just to draw a line from point A to point B. I don't care if it is a circle, a square, like however you do this line straight, like just connect it. Like however you want to work around this, just do it. And people couldn't figure that out. But so you go through MOS school, and then you get dropped into the fleet, they call it. And then that's like your shop, your company, your platoon that you're with. And then
so you're like 4 months in before you find out like who your potential battle buddies
yeah who like my guys are going to be that I'm going to be with all the time. It was Thanksgiving weekend of 2003 that I got to my actual duty station. So I went from March to November really not having a home. You're just in training, you're kind of just always traveling around doing stuff. But then it was November, and then so like that first week of December is actually when I found, it was like first or second week of December that I found out I'm going to Iraq. And it was, we were shipping out there like, we don't know when. They're like, well, right now it's just forecasted, but so we're going to start prepping stuff. With us being a maintenance facility, we had to like load up all our equipment, tools, put them in connexes and, shipping containers and get those down to the port, send trucks, tow trucks, other stuff out there, put those on cargo ships. And then I think that took us about a month to like gear up. And then it was, hey, just be ready. Like we didn't have any tools or any equipment back in San Diego where I was stationed at or Camp Pendleton. So it was really just training and just like watching videos and doing dumb shit every day. It was just always like games that we would play. And then until they put us on a 24-hour standby notice, we're like, hey, we don't know when, but here could be a day, could be a week, could be 2 weeks, but you're going to go on 24 hours. And then at that time, that's like when it's like kiss the wives goodbye.
Run, like get up, run, do your push-ups, your physicals, just go through.
Yeah, we did all. It
like
was
just,
physical training every
day
day
to day.
Yeah,
and then you're just basically trying to stay ready until.
Yep. Stay ready to ship out, and then all of a sudden we got that notice and take our stuff and go to the airport. We flew out it was some little airport in L.A. area north of Pendleton, and flew out on World Airlines. I'll never forget that because I'm like, what the hell? Like, this isn't like, I'm figuring it was going to be like some like C5, like, Air Force huge plane.
Just commercial
plane.
That's
commercial, yeah. Yeah. Like they throw us in there and pack us in like sardines, and it was kind of awkward. You're walking in with a rifle on, strapped to your chest, and it's like all the rifles got to go on the floor, and you know how cramped an airplane is. Well, now put a bunch of Marines in there with like day packs and their rifles on the floor, so you're like this the whole time it was like 17 hours of flight time we had to go from like LA to Germany and then to Kuwait. And
When you, so I mean, at that time, then you guys fly out. I mean, you knew the people you were with for just a little over a month, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know. Yeah. Those guys, I didn't know them very well. I mean, a lot of them had known each other because you kind of cycle in to these shops. And, you know, it's like your training group gets dropped in. So you might have 3 or 4 guys. And like for me getting dropped in, there was 3 of us that got dropped in from my training class to this shop or platoon. But I was the only one going to Iraq the first time.
Interesting.
And
How did
so,
that
yeah,
selection, like, how did that happen? Just because of your reputation at the time, or was
honestly, I
it?
volunteered. So we had another guy at the shop that his wife was supposed to be giving birth to their kid right around the time that we were going to be shipping out. Like we didn't know. They knew sometime like January to March. Well, she was supposed to be giving birth. And so he was like, hey, you know, is there anyone that is willing of the new guys? Well, I'm just like, hey, I'll go. Because I'm like, it's already going in my head. I'm like, shit, if I don't go to Iraq with these guys, what am I going to do back here? I'm going to be bored out of my freaking mind. And I didn't go through all this training to not go to Iraq. And at the time I was thinking, I was like, this is the only chance. Like,
Yeah,
this is a
because the
one.
war's gonna end in 5 months.
Yeah. I
There's
was
a
like,
lot
yeah,
of
it's going to be
people that
over,
yeah.
you know? And it's like, this is my chance to, you know, actually get into it. And so I volunteered. I was like, hey, I'll do it. And they were like, shit, all right, you know, you've got breed spot. And so that's how I got selected for that. And, you know, he stayed back. And yeah, ultimately, you know, I did another tour a couple years later. And it was just every cycle we would cycle guys in and out. So
So when you guys land for the first time, like you get over there. First of all, I've heard a lot of people describe sort of being on base that first time, the humidity in the air, just the dust, the smoke, like just the smells, and like just like when you got off. And I don't want to like plant necessarily anything. I want your take on it, but like, what's your first, like when you arrive, like what's that like? I mean, because it has to be a whirlwind coming from Iowa
oh,
to
it was. So we landed in, so we're going, this is into February of '04, and we're going from LA County. So it's like 55 degrees probably, which to them it's like frigid and shit. They're all wearing parkas, but going from that to Kuwait, and Kuwait was like 100 degrees, 110, but it's like no humidity, just dry heat. And you get off in, these aren't airports that have, you know, the tunnels that you walk through and shit like that, the jetways or whatever. It's like you're going down some stairs and you're out on the tarmac, and you're walking. And so you've got all these jet engines going, and it felt like someone was just taking like a hairdryer and just like holding it to your face the entire time. Like it's just a constant like whirlwind of different wind directions, and then just the hot air. And it was just like, wow. Like I remember it was the middle of the night, and I'm just like looking around like, oh shit, this is it. Like we've got light towers up everywhere. So I mean, it's still, you can tell it's nighttime, but you know, everything's, you know, you can walk around and everything just fine. But I just remember like, oh shit, like this is it. Like, and then from there, we're in Kuwait for a week, and before we convoyed up with all of our equipment, so we had to get all of our Humvees and our trucks, and like we had wreckers or big tow trucks for like the other trucks, and so we had to get all that stuff and gear it up. And I just remember like we were building, we didn't have armor kits for anything at that time, and so
hold on a second. Was like the IED thing? Because I assume, did you guys know what you were armoring the vehicles for, like at that time of the war, or was
kind of.
and maybe that's a poor question, but does it make sense of like
we knew there was
their
IEDs.
tactics?
Yep.
Okay.
We knew there was IEDs. We didn't have like, there wasn't like commercially developed like armor kits. Like there weren't Humvees that were coming already factory armored. There wasn't these retrofit kits that we were getting later on that, you know, we'd take the doors off and we'd have to fortify the hinges and hang these 800-pound doors on and all that stuff. We didn't have any of that shit. But what we did have was, we were a maintenance shop. So we had like diesel mechanics and truck mechanics, heavy equipment mechanics. We had welders. So we had guys that's their whole job in the Marine Corps is just to weld. And so we're like, well, shit, it's like big borrow and steal. And we found out like this one Army unit had a bunch of this AR like 500 steel plating. And we're like, shit, let's go see if we can, barter for some of that, or just like, hey, look over there. And we're like stealing sheets of this shit and cutting out and building doors to put on our Humvees. Cause we were thinking more like, small arms fire and stuff like that. And then, there, big piles of sand everywhere, and sandbags are just literally everywhere. And so we were filling sandbags, and we're putting them all on the floorboards of the Humvees to help in case there was like IEDs for explosions to blow up. And it's funny too, because like guys were taking on some of these Humvees they were like 4-door Humvees that we just had canvas roofs to them. And so on the back area, we were mounting machine guns in the back of these. And like our welder guys were just like tube steel, like making up mount kits for our 240s and Mark 19s and 50 cals. And so then some Marines got to stand back there in this area. So we were putting up, like we were building sandbag walls on the fenders of these Humvees, which those lasted like maybe 3 turns out on the highway because they're all just falling off the, off the truck, because there was no way really securing them to them. We just thought, a 60-pound sandbag would hold its, shape, and it wasn't working. But yeah, we had to essentially up armor our own shit to get up to Iraq. And then from there, it was probably close to a month later that we started getting actual, like, they were shipping in these kits that had doors and had ballistic plating to put on the sides, and like big skid plates or like belly plates to put underneath to help deflect.
I mean, that was an extremely important like sort of evolution of that war, that, not to talk about it necessarily past tense, but of just how to armor those vehicles. And a lot of like special forces guys and stuff, even that you listen to, like a lot of the strategy and how they're going to get from point A to point B was like how well they were equipped with their vehicles.
Oh, exactly. Guys were hanging like old. We were getting like new body armor, and they were hanging like old flak jackets and shit on the side of their Humvees. Like, even though it's like, plate this big, it's something better than nothing. Like, if they try to go center mass on that door and try to shoot whoever's in there, they're going to hit that plate, hopefully, and have that, stop it or deflect it. But
what's your first trip like then, to that point? Like, so you guys, you get flown in and your equipment gets there, and that's when you're trying to like sort of, hey, we got to get our equipment ready to get to base then. And then, so like, what's that look like? Your first trip then, from leaving like wherever you flew into to your first base? Or were you already at your first base when you were doing all that?
No. That was in Kuwait.
Okay.
So we knew that was like, you can kind of let your guard down a little bit, because we're in Kuwait. It's friendly area. It's a big army base of everybody, and it's a lot of inbound and outbound people. But so we had time. It wasn't like we were like, looking over our shoulders every time we're trying to fill a sandbag. But we were there. We had guys that went ahead of us, like that rode with this gear on these cargo ships. So they got in maybe a couple weeks. I think they were there even like a week or 2 weeks prior to us getting there. So they had like all the trucks already like staged up, lined up. But then once the lion's share of us got there, then it was like, okay, now we've got all hands on deck, and let's actually fortify these things. And then from there, we just had a big convoy, and we drove up into Iraq. And I will never forget, I kind of laugh at it again, but we had just left this base. I don't know how far down the road we were, maybe an hour or something like that. And it was before we were entering into Iraq, and our like convoy commander was like, hey, this is our time to like actually fire our weapons to make sure everyone's like good. Because like once we go into Iraq, we want to make sure that if you're on a machine gun, like you know how to pull that trigger, and that weapon system's going to fire. And
is part of that, sorry to interrupt you, but do you think part of that is also just like mentally preparing people to, like, obviously you fired in training and stuff, but just like maybe get that first trigger pull out of the way?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
It could be
curious,
and I guess to work out the bugs, maybe like both mentally and physically, mechanically, on the weapon systems. But there's this just massive berm, like 200 yards off the road. And so we just kind of like pull off onto the shoulder of the road, it's like out in the county, you're just like, I'm just going to rack off some rounds. Well, we start lobbing rounds at this thing, start shooting. all of a sudden someone had a Mark 19, which is a grenade launcher, and throws grenades basically like a little bigger than like a golf ball, but start shooting these things. They went over that berm, and all of a sudden we start hearing like jet engines like rearing up, and it was a bunch of helicopters. There was like a helicopter squadron that was like Army or something on the other side of that berm, and we didn't know. And like nobody, like to this day, like I've never heard of anyone getting hurt or killed or, any equipment getting damaged over there. But it was like all of a sudden, like 2 or 3 helicopters just like rear up and start taking off out of there. And we're like, oh shit. And then they're like calling like ceasefire, like stop shooting at that berm. Cause like we don't know what's on the other side of it, but we had no idea. And this berm, like from a distance, it was probably like 40, 50 feet tall. So, I mean, you're not seeing anything on the other side of it. But at the time too, we didn't have like, we had like Blue Force tracker units, but they weren't very like predominantly used, prevalent. And those would track like where friendly forces are at. So like GPS units that like, even though you're not in communication with us on the daily basis, but we can still see where other friendlies are at. So to know like
how easy a friendly fire can happen. Though.
Oh yeah, it happened all the time. I mean, we'd have missions in convoys that, in the middle of the night, we're getting shot at, and all of a sudden you start seeing some flashes over here. Well, you don't know where all the insurgents are shooting at you from. So it's like, I'm going to direct it over here and start just laying suppressive fire over here, not knowing that those could be friendlies. And so, there was, a lot of, we called it like blue on blue contact, which is just friendly fire. But a lot of those situations were happening. And then that's where they kind of had to rehone, the game plans and say, hey, we've got to watch where everyone's at. And then that was bigger in our mission briefings before going out that, hey, we will have this unit and this unit and this unit within our AO, and they're going to be on this area of the road hunkered down. So
it's extremely important, I suppose, to stay disciplined in your routes and different things, and just to make sure that stuff doesn't happen. But did you guys, I mean was the first trek in hopefully uneventful, like give you guys a chance to like get on base then, or what was the post, or I guess whatever terminology you would use for where you were headed to, was that a fairly like new setup that you were going to, or was that one like fairly established at like when you got there?
Originally the first one we went to, it was an old Iraqi air base. So they had like fighter jets and stuff, which were kind of cool because there were still like some of them sitting out there. So like we were out there like I've got pictures with me with like big missiles and shit, like just sitting on them, and like we're sending those pictures home to family, and they're like, "Are you sure? Like, how do you know that stuff wouldn't just go off?" And I'm like, "We didn't. We're just playing with it." Just like
a bunch of Marines out here.
Just like look at this big bomb. And like I'm gonna sit on it and ride it like it's a a horse. Just doing dumb shit that Marines do. But that place, it was somewhat. It wasn't set up for us, but it was already a military base. So I mean, there were certain security measures that were already taken on there, which was nice. However, like a lot of the insurgents, their counter intel already knows where everything's at. They know where to walk in and direct fire, like mortar rounds. They know, hey, these guys are taking.
They know the coordinates.
They know the
exactly.
coordinates. Yeah. They've got all this stuff GPSed, and they know what they're doing. But it's just a matter of staying one step ahead of them and just watching your back at all times. And but we got it was all Taqadum, Iraq, TQ, just outside of Fallujah and Ramadi. So
Fallujah was pretty hot for a while, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, and that was right when. So that was one mission that I was on. Was to go in. There was some civilians from I think Blackwater or KBR. I think it was Blackwater guys.
Is that? Are we talking about private contractors?
Private contractors
that are working on behalf of the military.
Yep.
We can maybe keep that a separate conversation.
Sure.
Conversation, but the contractor thing's interesting to me too, and like how they work, if they work directly with you or not. But
so we did some. I'll be honest. I never really grasped the whole like mission that they were there for. Okay. We talked with them all the time, and they were. I don't think a single one of them was not prior military. Like they were all prior military guys. Some of them, like one guy that we ran a lot of missions with, he did a couple tours during like the original Desert Storm.
I actually have a guest coming on, just talked to him potentially next week that did private contract work. So I'm extremely interested to just see
Yeah.
like how that whole thing blends. But
it was definitely like when we were out there making like $30,000 a year, and these guys are making like 220. You're just like, shit. Like, sign me up, man. Like, I got like 3 more years left of this, and I'm jumping ship and doing what you're doing, and just raking in cash. Because like for us, I mean, they had more flexibility, more freedom. And that could be a double-edged sword, because that's what happened it was March of 2004. They went into some market there in Fallujah and got overtaken and got killed. They like paraded their bodies through the city, hung them. They burned their bodies, hung them from a train track bridge, railroad bridge, just all in a act of like, we don't give a fuck about anybody. Like, we'll kill everybody. And so then that's when the Marines were like, no, we're going to take the city back. And so we went in and we were there for, I think it was like 11 days.
is this your first mission?
Not necessarily like, so we did missions, like we did convoys, but this was, so our unit was a combat engineer unit. And so we had mine flails, we had bulldozers, we had like front end loaders and stuff like that. And so when it came to building RPG fences or HESCO barriers, we were the ones out there doing all that. And so, but we would team up with the grunts. And so even though they, we would do foot patrols with them when they needed it, they needed bodies. We're bodies. We've got rifles. We're trained to use them. So we would go do that. That was my first, like legit hard, like I went on a couple convoys before, or quite a few convoys before that. And a couple of them we got fired at and, return fire. It was almost like playing a video game, at the end of the day. Like, we didn't have anyone get hurt or killed at that time. So to us, it was more just like, oh, this is kind of fun and makes the days go by.
Was it sort of like just lob, like AK fire that you're receiving at that time? Or, I mean, was it like direct where they had to eliminate them? I mean,
it'd be, like small arms fire, like AK and handguns, like not a lot of handguns, but a lot of rifles, AKs and different, I can't think of all the different little Soviet rifles and stuff like that they had, but
they'd pop up though, take bad guys out.
RPGs, a lot of RPGs. And then we take mortar fire quite a bit. So even going down the road on a convoy, you might get a couple guys that are taking pop shots with like small arms. But the next thing you know, they start walking the mortar rounds in, because those are the big ones that are going to take out a truck. An AK-47 is not going to take out our trucks. You shoot the tires, we got run flats, we'll still push through. One of our trucks, we took 2 flat tires in the front and we still drove for probably 2 miles, like with flat tires. And it was just like, we're getting out of the kill zone. We're not going to be sitting ducks trying to swap tires out in the middle of this shit. But yeah, the, back to that mission in Fallujah. I mean, that was a pretty bad one that, we went in. I remember our mission briefing and they're telling us there's like 25 or 2,800 Marines going into this thing. And they said that the enemies at the time was the Mujahideen. And they're like, yeah, there's, suspected like upwards of 20,000. And I'm like, fuck. I'm like, I know I'm a Marine and like math isn't like my specialty, but like 20,000 and 2,500, like we're going up like 20 to 1, 10 to 1. Now it's not necessarily all that happened. Like, who knows how many were even in there. I don't even know if they have like legitimate numbers on how many people, like whether it was civilians or insurgents that were actually killed.
Still daunting though. And then there's just the element of unknown. Like, holy shit.
How many left? How many, are they doing trying to scare us and say, hey, we've got 5 times the amount of people we actually have just to scare us from not going in. But, that's kind of not a taunt or, a fake that you want to do to the U.S. military to say, hey, we've got more people because we've got even more. We're just going to gear up even more. We're going to go 5 to 1 type of thing. There's no fair fight. It's just in a fight. It's like we do what we got to do.
So they brief you, and is this like the act of them parading those guys through the streets and everything has already happened?
Yeah, this is like right after that we started gearing up. So that was like the big thing that made this push. They had spread like the U.S. government had spread like pamphlets around, like airdropping them from like helicopters, just like throwing these pamphlets. So like we were catching them, like walking, you'd find them sitting on the ground. I'm like, oh shit, that's like a souvenir. So I'm just putting it in my pocket. So I've got like a whole treasure chest of random shit from Iraq that was not like military gear, it was stuff that we could bring back, but it's like, you know, it doesn't mean anything to most people. But like for me, I'm like, damn, this is like, I can't read it. It's all in Arabic, but it, you know, basically says in there like, hey, listen to this radio station. They'll tell you what's going on. So like the people that, you know, don't want to get hurt, the families and stuff like that, it's like, hey, get out of town because shit's going to go down. And we, you know, damn near decimated that city, and then pulled out because it was kind of a failed mission, pulled out. And then they went back, the Marines went back in November of that year and just like wiped it off the face of the earth.
I mean, what's that look like though? So you guys get briefed, and then it's just like convoy up, and you're just rolling out, or I mean, was it just describe, I guess, specifically like what that all looks like, or kind of like what your role, or like how I mean, that has to be that first mission where you're going into this shit is real. I mean, I just, you know, like walk us through that, because mentally that has to be kind of wild.
Yeah, no. You know, it was just
there to do your job.
Yeah, just there to do your job.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, you know, like a tailgate safety meeting type of thing that, you know, keep, you know, someone gets shot, take care of them. You know, watch your backs. You know, this is the real, a lot of it was, you know, this is the real shit, guys. You know, this isn't training, you know, just.
So when you guys rolled in, I mean, was part of your job like in that then, or you're like with your platoon to like establish an area where you could work on vehicles that got messed up? Or I mean, like what's that look like on that mission?
So we were there more for support of vehicles. So like if they were doing like a Humvee patrol, like a light vehicle patrol or something were to happen, then we would go out with our tow truck and grab it, bring it back to, like, we had a little compound going on, setting up barriers, setting up like the HESCOs and filling those, and just, you know, even setting up, I don't know if you know what HESCOs are. They're like big chain link fence deals that you can pull out. They use them now for flooding, actually, but you pull them out and they're 6 feet tall. Some are 4 feet tall, some are 8 feet tall, but pull them out and then we'd fill them with dirt. So now they're like these big 4 feet cubes that just hold the dirt. And then so that'll stop vehicles most of the time. Like a car's not going to ram through that. Stop small arm fire, RPG fire, and stuff like that. But even set up those HESCOs, like you got one guy driving the tram, which is the front end loaders, you know, these big, like, what were they, John Deere, like 544s or something. One guy driving that, another guy probably ground guiding him, and then you got 2 or 3 other Marines like pulling these barriers out to set them up. So like everything you have, you've got multiple hands to deal with it. But and then we were sleeping in fighting holes. I'll never forget that, because like in boot camp, even like the drill instructors are like, they teach you how to dig a fighting hole, you know, or Army calls them, I think, foxholes or whatever. Dig this little hole that's, you know, basically from me to you, just a little box that we can sleep in here, put a little roof over it. And that's where you live, and you have like your sector of fire out here. And I remember we were digging those and like putting plywood and sandbags on top of them just in case anyone tries to drop mortars. Or I remember they had a Claymore mine that we were in charge of, and I remember like Claymore mines were like Vietnam era shit, and they'll just like decimate, you know, they'll take out a whole army of guys that were walking. And I remember we would move from fighting hole to fighting hole like each night. So we had, I don't know, 7 or 8 of them along these bridges. And so it just kind of changed up your scenery, you know, what you're looking at. And I remember when we got into one that had a Claymore on it, and I looked at my corporal, which is like my boss above me, and I'm like, hey, let me do this. I'm like what's our ROE on this? Like our rules of engagement. Like we weren't briefed on that part, like what to do with a Claymore mine. And I'm like, let a stray dog out there and we'll blast that thing 6 city blocks.
Yeah. To that point, I mean, rules of engagement is something that throughout the years of that war changed drastically. I mean, when you guys are there on that first, like in that first era, I mean, the rules of engagement were kind of Wild West, probably, wasn't it?
It was more, if you felt threatened,
yeah, which is,
you know, shoot first, we'll figure it out later. Yeah. And we had, I mean, some of our rules of engagement were even if you saw someone standing on the side of the road and they look to be counting vehicles or counting spacing, because what they're doing is they're counting spacing between, because we try to always keep everything like pretty uniform. So if you're keeping 100-yard spacing between trucks, you're doing that because if one truck gets hit by an ID, you don't want to take out two trucks. You just want to take it out the one, and then we'll figure it out from there. But if you saw them like counting spacing, counting vehicles, you saw them with a shovel on the side of the road, you could shoot them. And it was just like, there's only one reason you're standing on the side of the road with a shovel. You're digging a hole. What are you digging a hole for? To plant IEDs.
Yeah, you're not out there farming.
If they're on a cell phone or any kind of communication, if they look like they have, you know, a pager in their hand, a cell phone, if they're on the phone, take them out, because, you know, they could be talking to their mom, but they also could be calling in some sort of, you know, other attack on us, or radioing into an IED to have that IED go off, because we had like command det and pressure det, like all different types of IEDs that some of them, they'd go off with nobody within 100 miles of, you know, watching them. It's just for whoever walks across this, it's going to go off. And then you have other ones that, you know, they're watching us when it, you know, goes off. So anytime like our trucks, like we're on a convoy and a truck, we get hit with an IED, it's like your head's on a swivel. You're looking for anybody and everybody in the area. And, you know, more than likely you're trying to throw some rounds down range at them.
That's crazy, dude. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously for just the average person that wasn't in the military and over there. I mean, just trying to like grasp, I guess, maybe it's a saving grace, I guess, that you just sort of have your job and you need to do it and like tunnel vision dish, but you're still a fucking human. Like, and there's just the element of holy shit, you know?
There is that. And that was something that I'll never forget, like seeing the first dead body out there that had been ran over on the side of the road, but you know, they'd already been killed and then like trucks had ran over them. But then it got to the point where you didn't see insurgents as humans, like for us. Like it wasn't, it's hard to explain, but you just didn't see them as another person. Like walking down the street in Des Moines, Iowa, you see a person, you don't know them, but you still have respect for them. Like you're not just like, oh, whatever, you know. But out there, it got to the point where these bad guys had, you know, they were, you know, below scum and to us. And so it wasn't like, oh, I feel bad for, I mean, we would see dead bodies on the side, especially into the cities, into like Fallujah and Ramadi. You'd see dead bodies just laying on the side of the road on the gutter. And it's like sad that like little kids are like walking past them looking and this guy's head's blown open. But it's like he did something wrong. And for us to see that, it was just like for here, you know, in the fall time, seeing dead deer on the side of the road, like you're not thinking twice, like, oh, that was crazy. Like, again, that first dead body you see in Iraq, you're just like, whoa, like, is that real? Like, how the hell, like, why is no one there? And then next thing you know, you go down these roads and there's like 3 dead bodies and you're just like, oh, whatever. Like, not my problem.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of, to your point of the ROE too, like, you know, you're going through, it's a male, he's armed, those sort of like those elements that potentially desensitize you to that anyway. Like it's not his name's Jamal or Ted. Like
we have idea.
There's no like human attachment or element, I guess, to that part of it either. So I mean, you're just kind of like, this is a threat. You eliminate the threat, you move on, right? Yeah. Did you guys at that time? So, I mean, is it safe to say, I guess I just want to try to grasp, like, you in your platoon, like, what you guys were trying to achieve. I mean, it was sort of your guys' job to help set these bases up, like, on the construction side of things, get things established, protection, armor the vehicles. Like, that's kind of the gist of, like, what your guys' role was. Were you working, or, like, Marines that you were working closely with, were the indigenous or, like, the natives that were there being utilized yet much? Or at that time of the war, was it, like, we don't know who to trust, we're not trusting anybody type of deal?
We did have, like, third country, like, TCNs, we call them, like, third country nationals.
Okay.
Which would come from, like, the neighboring countries. And looking back, it's like, how did we, like, legitimately vet them to know that this, you know, guy going by Jacob, his brother's not one of the insurgents and he's telling his brother shit, but Jacob's working on AC units for, you know, our housing that we're living in and working at the chow hall and like serving us food, because that's what we utilize a lot of them for, like chow hall and like cleaning out all the porta shitters and I mean, there were everything from like air conditioner mechanics to driving the little, they'd have like at one base, some of these larger bases, they'd have these like bus systems that you can just hop on the bus and ride it to a different area. Like if you wanted to go to like the internet center, because back then like internet was still like a new thing, but you can get on the internet and like email your mom type stuff. And so they would do all that stuff, but we had them then. But yeah, it was always one of those things where like, you only trust them so far because I'm like, geez, like, especially like the bus drivers, I'm like, man, these guys like literally can make like one turn and take 20, U.S. service members off into some bad area and hold us captive type of thing, which I think would be a horrible idea for them to do because we all have our rifles with us. Like we've all got guns and ammo. Like,
but at that point, they're willing to do like,
well, yeah, you don't know what they're not.
They don't value it, or the bad guys didn't, know.
Yep.
So getting back into it a little bit, I mean, you guys, you have that mission in Fallujah. You mentioned that it was sort of unsuccessful. What did you mean by that? Just like maybe
weren't getting to my understanding, like we weren't getting where they wanted to go with it, and we were taking too many casualties on our end, and it just wasn't. It was something that we needed to pull out and regroup and kind of reassess what's going on, reassess what they're doing, what we're doing. I mean, there was certain little things in there that I remember we borrowed a armored dozer from the Army and it dropped into, like we were clearing through backyards with it because the roads were too hot to go on. And we're trying to build a roadway or pathway through there, and it drops into a septic system. And so this thing, like, I don't know what those things weighed at the time, like 120,000 pound bulldozer falls into like a 10-foot deep hole.
Important because the sewer systems there are just trenches, essentially,
for the most part,
that run in and then connect and then eventually just go out to like a pool.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, like, is that what you ran into?
Yeah, they just dropped into it. And so then it was like, I think that took like 2 days to figure out how to get this big armored, it was a armored D9, how to get this thing out of this hole. And then it's like coordinating with the Army and then bringing in like the Army tank wreckers that they have that like tow a tank. They have big lift systems on them, big lift frame deals that they can put on. And so they had to come out and do that. But we can't just leave this bulldozer sitting there and say, hey, we're going home for the night. Like if we were to leave it, the Iraqis would have, our surgeons would have figured out a way to either pull that out themselves, and now they just got this, couple $1 million piece of gear, or they would just burn it up. And we had that later on where we left a machine out on a road and went back to it, and the insurgents had torched the thing.
Which we later found out our government
left a bunch of
okay with just doing that anyway.
Yeah, just leaving shit out there.
Maybe that isn't
without even destroying it.
Yeah, maybe that isn't for this podcast, but that's extremely interesting though. I think one of the goals I had in mind before you came in and some of the perspective that I wanted to gain, because if we're being honest, like the cool part for me to be able to sit here and talk to you about this kind of stuff is from my own perspective, and then obviously anybody that's listening, but I think the perception that most of us that didn't go fight in the war, the perception that we have of it is only as good as whatever information that we hear or see, right? And most of us are aware that the mainstream media sort of feeds us whatever it is we want to see, but also besides that, from movies in some of the heroes, like it's not all just always you're going after one of the deck of card guys. You and 6 other dudes storm inside a house and take the guy out, and it's like hoorah, right? Yeah. So, I mean, some of that day-to-day stuff, and is it safe to say that that's what Marines are sort of known for, is like that infrastructure type, like grinder, like paving? I mean, building a new road because the other one's too hot. Is that like specifically what the Marines would typically be known?
A lot of like adapt and overcome, and figure out constantly, shift fire. This isn't working. So let's, go a different route or figure out how it's going to work. Just a lot of, again, adapt and overcome.
Yeah. So like when that dozer went down in that pool of shit, essentially, like, does that mean like more troops got to go out? like stand guard, try to protect, like
Yeah.
while you guys are
Well,
going
yeah,
out
then
and
we
trying
had
to
to,
like retrieve it?
instead of guys sleeping in these fighting holes, it's like we need some guys out watching this, posting security on this piece of equipment. And same goes for like, we had a couple missions like picking up down helicopters, stuff like that. That, helicopter goes down. It doesn't mean helicopters went down not quite a bit, but they went down, and it wasn't something that you'd probably even hear on the news because nobody was injured. It was just, they had problems and they set it down, in the middle of a field next to a road or whatever. And it's like, we still had to post security on it. Can't let this, $30-60 million piece of gear just get taken over.
And that would typically be your platoon that would, if it was in your
kind of
area,
who was in that
obviously.
area. Yeah. So you go out and pick it up with a crane and set it on a flatbed trailer and tow it back wherever it's got to go. But yeah, we'd have to post security for that, or they'd have like QRF teams maybe from that base that would send out too if it was like right outside the base. So it really just depend on where it's at.
Quick reaction
reaction
force.
Yep.
How long? So this is all in your first deployment. This stuff that you're talking about right now. How long was your first deployment?
7 months.
7 months. Jesus, that's a while, isn't it?
Seems like a lot, but doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, now years go by so fast.
Yeah, that's a very like vague question, but I mean, for like from a deployment standpoint, though, is that pretty standard or?
It was standard for the Marine Corps.
Okay.
The Army guys now, I think they would go out sometimes like 12, 13 months that they would get sent out. Air Force guys that we met up with out there would be like 2-3 months, and we're like, oh damn, we want your job. Fly out, and before you know it, you're already gearing up to go back home.
Yeah, and SF guys, I mean, those guys, they tend to, I think, be on shorter rotations as well too.
But I think
suppose
they
it just
also have
depends
multiples though. Like they'll come out for 2 or 3 months, go home for 2 or 3 months, come back out 2 or 3 months, and it's like, I don't know, which is the lesser of two evils there. If you'd rather just do that whole 7 months at one time or half a year or whatever, and like our EOD guys, our explosives guys, they would do like 6-month deployments. Got a couple buddies that were doing that too. But they would do 6 months in Iraq, go home, 6 months back out.
Do you have any oh shit moments in that first 7 months?
Probably had quite a few of them. You try to...
Any specific ones that you're just like, that stand out in your memory of like, fuck, we might not make it home?
Yeah. I mean, well, there's quite a few of those.
I mean, you could share whatever you want to. But.
I mean, I just remember like... They always say complacency kills. And when we were sitting on those bridges, there was 3 of us at this point in this one bigger fighting hole that we had that was overseeing like the hospital and then the bridges and shit. And we'd see these, the cars coming in on the roads. And this was days into it. So you're like physically and mentally drained. Like for the first few nights, it was like 1 hour on, 1 hour off. So like you would stay up for an hour and like watch your post, like watch your little sector of fire, make sure no one's kind of sneaking up on us and shit doesn't hit the fan. And then like if it's 2 of us in the fighting hole, then I'd wake you up and be like, hey bro, get up. Well, then I'm trying to sleep in this dirt hole, and all the meanwhile, like the Air Force had their AC-130 gunship, like lighting shit up in the city, and those machine guns on that thing just like vibrate the ground. So like dirt's like falling in on you and you're like, fuck, like I'm just trying to sleep. Like get your Kevlar helmet over your face. And it's like, you can't be claustrophobic in those situations. But you're just like, you're doing 1 hour on, 1 hour off overnight. And then during the day, you're all up. And so it's not like, oh, well, yeah, I'll do this bullshit shift overnight and then I'll sleep during the day. Like it's not an option there. But this was, I don't know what day, but it was days into it that there was 3 of us in this fighting hole. And one of the guys that was in my platoon that he came from North Carolina, just goofy bastard, real country kid. And we're sitting there fucking around. Well, we had a bunch of hand grenades in our fighting hole with us. And we were getting complacent. And like when we were in the fighting holes, like we'd take our flak and our flak jacket and Kevlar helmet off and stuff like that, even though technically we were supposed to have all that shit on all the time. We're supposed to have like our blouses on, which is like your long sleeve shirts. But we were taking those off and just have our skivvy shirts and our trousers on and just like chilling out in our deal. Well, all of a sudden, I can't remember if it was a small arms fire started shooting at us or an RPG. Something happened, but it sparked our interest. And we're like, oh shit, well, we better start throwing our shit on. And this kid just goes to throw his flag or his Kevlar his blouse on, and that RP or that hand grenade was laying right on his blouse. And I just remember going like this, like woof, and it like bounces off the ceiling and like hits the ground, and we're like, oh fuck. And look, I mean, the clips always fall out of those things. Like it didn't have it still had the spoon and the pin in there, but there's also a third safety measure, the little thumb clip. But that was gone. But it was just the fact that it hit the ground, and it was just like, fuck, dude. Like if that would have got caught on a button on his blouse and pulled that, pulled on that spoon or pulled the pin out to where the spoon fell off, it's like we would all be fucked. And I mean, because we were in this tiny little fighting hole, and those have like a 5-meter kill radius. So we're definitely within that kill radius. Like we're dead. We're at minimum losing limbs and shit, and probably blind.
Just kind of a wake up call.
That was definitely
shit.
a wake up call, and it was like a huge like adrenaline rush. And then like the whole like whatever we were getting shot at for was they were never even progressed to anything. So it was just like, holy shit! Now you got this huge like adrenaline dump. And you're just like awake, and it was like, damn, like that was fucking close. Like that was real close. Like we better watch where we're putting these, because we thought we had them all set up on this like little shelf we had built in there, but for whatever reason, the one was laying on his blouse, and then it was like, damn, yeah, we got to watch that shit a little bit better. But I mean, aside from that, I mean, I'm sure more will come to mind after, but your mind really has a weird way of dumping, a lot of trauma, like at least for me, like a lot of the bad shit, it's like you look back at anything in life and you're like, man, I hated this. It's like even looking back at boot camp, it's like I don't know of any Marine that'll tell you they love boot camp. Like I think they're lying, or they're like been out of boot camp for 20 years and they forgot about all the bad shit. But it was like when you're going through boot camp, like you hate it every day. You're like, this is bullshit. Like I'm paying the price for this other kid that can't run fast. And now we're all having to run these laps over and over and over again. But you eventually over time, like dump that shit. And
there's a lot of people that talk about, and to your point, like just to talk about trauma in general. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we all suppress, and also to your point, like it doesn't necessarily have to be military related, but just any trauma that people go through. I mean, it is human nature to put that shit away, and it can cause issues that you're not even aware of directly, obviously, if it's back there and you don't address it. But I mean, I can only imagine, in those scenarios are obviously extreme cases of that. But let's talk a little bit about, well, first of all, you mentioned like the blue on blue stuff in the beginning, and I think that war specifically, just because some of the environment was super unpredictable. You mentioned like helos going down, and I think a lot of that was like at altitude. Those guys struggled or weren't aware sometimes, like trying to climb mountains. They didn't have enough engine power, and there's a lot of shit, right? That was like, again, not war related in the way that you would think of, just like bad guys shooting at us, but just like shit you guys had to deal with over there that it's not fucking the United States anymore, right? Like it's a foreign goddamn land. Just was there any other like scenarios of that was like that you guys changed what your original protocol was because like something happened? Or I mean, while you were there over that 7 months, did the blue on blue stuff improve? Was it like, did it feel more coordinated, or did it just sort of, and this is a lot, but I want to try to grasp in my brain, like, did it feel like you were just on an island out there with you and your Marines, or did it feel like you were over there with the rest of United States fighting forces collectively? Like the feeling.
You did feel that collectively, because especially during the day, or I mean, even at night, I mean, you'd pass other trucks, other, convoys, or you'd see other missions that are out. So you did know that there was others around. Like didn't feel like it was just me and the 24 Marines that I'm out with right now type of thing.
To your point, the 130 that was keeping you up at night too, I guess, like, or the whatever.
Yeah, the AC-130. Yeah. And those things would go off all the time, and you did get kind of acclimated to a lot of that too. Just the sounds of fire and, just so many different things that feel like, oh, did you hear that, mortar rounds last night? slip through it, guys.
Yeah.
Or even like the sirens that would go off.
Really?
Like, first time you're on base and you hear like the incoming sirens and like everyone's grabbing their flak jacket and Kevlar and like running for like these concrete barriers to like hide. And it's like everyone does that for like a couple of times. And then it's like goes off at like 2:00 in the morning and you're trying to sleep and you're like, fuck, dude, like if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. Like, by the time I get my shit on and like run 20 yards, is that really going to make a difference? Like, I'm probably going to get fucked up anyways. And so it was like, we would just like sleep through it. And it was always funny. Like, speeding up to like my second deployment, I was in charge of 19 Marines. And I'd have some of my Marines like wake up and like, hey, Sergeant Kate, you hear that? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I got to be up at 06. Like, dude, I ain't going to fucking run out
dude.
there and, sit and shoot the shit with some Army guys for 30 minutes and then decide now to go back to bed. I'm like, if it's going to hit our house, it's going to hit our house. Like, let's just keep our fingers crossed. And if it's going to hit that building, it's going to hit that building. It's not, there's nothing we can do about it.
So you get home from that first deployment. I mean, what's that look like? Like, do you get an opportunity? I mean, you talked about, is that when you worked with the recruiter stuff, like staying busy? Do you get an opportunity to sort of like decompress and chill for a little bit? Not sleep in a fucking fighting hole, like obviously has to feel good, but like, does it feel like you're back home and chilling, or does it still feel like kind of, I'm a Marine? I don't know how to make that make sense, but
Like how to transition.
yeah.
A little bit. I mean, like we came back and they give you like 2 weeks off. Like, no, it's like goes against your like leave, you only get, I don't know what it was, like 15 days a year leave or whatever, 10 days a year leave. But it goes against that. So it's not like they're just giving you free time. Like, hey, thanks for like going and working 7 days a week, like 20 hours a day. And now we're going to give you some free time. That wasn't the case, but, come back and you get the opportunity to take some days off if you want. And then, from there, it's just like literally like going back over equipment that's either being shipped back or, I mean, you hit the ground running every time. It wasn't like, oh, we're just going to sit around and twiddle our thumbs for weeks on end with nothing to do. It was, we were a product of the government that we had to keep busy. Like,
But did you get a chance to come home for a little bit?
I did, yeah. So I came home. I did 6 weeks of recruiter's assistance, they called it.
Oh, you did that
I did
Iowa.
that. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, here in Urbandale.
So that gave you an opportunity to kind of chill back in Iowa, like
a little
not
bit,
chill,
yeah.
but be in your
Be home.
comfort zone. If
Yeah,
you will.
yeah. And it was kind of crazy because it was like at that time you see like where some friends have like doing nothing different than what we were doing 2 years prior before I joined. And then other friends are like completely out of state. And, there wasn't social media back then either. So it was like, you're writing letters. Like even when I was in boot camp, like we were writing hand letters. Like I had friends writing me letters and it was just, but yeah, you come back and you try to call them on the phone and, oh, I'm living in, North Carolina now. I'm like, the hell are you doing out there, dude? Like I'm back in Des Moines.
Yeah, like, because does it feel like time sort of isn't going by when you're over there? I mean, what is that like? Because life's happening back here,
Yeah.
and that's one of the weirdest parts, I think, for Americans, and why a lot of us probably don't put like the thought or weight into the war that is even being fucking fought, is because our lives don't really change day to day. I mean,
Sure.
there's economic impacts and there's things, but to a common civilian, like shit's just happening.
Yep.
So you guys are over there doing your thing. I mean, does it feel like time sort of stands still when you're gone and then you get back and then shit has changed? And
Yeah.
it's like hard to keep up, or what's that like?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it definitely was. It was, because and the way you say it, it's like when you're over there, like you're doing all your work, but really nothing like has changed for like our platoon in Camp Pendleton. Like the shit is still just how it was when we left. So when we come back to that, but then when I would come to Des Moines and see like everyone else is doing different things, my buddy's got a different car, and it's like, when the hell did all this happen? It's like, well, you've been gone for like 2 years, dude. And it's like, holy shit, like didn't even think about it,
So your second,
But you're trying to play catch up at that same time,
Right.
and it's like, oh, let's go to the bar, and because like when I joined, I wasn't able to go to the bars. Well, then when I come back on recruiter assistance, I can actually go to the bars, and it's like, well, hey, let's go try this place, let's go try that place, and
what's your so you do the recruiter's assistant stuff. I assume then you go back to, is it Pendleton?
Yep, Camp Pendleton.
So you go back there, and then how long is it before you get shipped back out again?
Oh, geez, maybe a year. let's see, when did I shipped out in July of '06. So yeah, a little. I mean, so Iraq was February of '04 to November, and then or October, November, and then yeah, it was like a year and a half later that then I shipped back.
Was there from that time frame difference? You're a little more seasoned now. You know, really probably coming into your own. I mean, obviously, as a young man too. I mean, we're developing through that time. I mean, a lot of shit changes in your early 20s, right? What's it like, or was there any differences going back the second time?
Um, yeah, a lot of differences actually. Um, Something just kind of laugh at because so in the Marine Corps you have you know there's different hierarchies, different levels of like on the lowest end you've got like your squad and you're part of a platoon, that's part of a company, part of a battalion, part of a regiment. And at the time, like our battalion, since I only had so much time till I EAS, which is like my end of service, the end of my contract, since I had like less than a year, my battalion was like, you're non-deployable. Well, our regiment at the time, their rules, which they overrule us, but their rules were 6 months. If you had 6 months or less, you're non-deployable. So they came to our battalion and said, hey, we need all your Marines that are in this 6 month to 1 year area. And there was a handful of us that ended up having to go. Yeah. And so it wasn't like I volunteered. It was just, I mean, at the time, I honestly could have cared less if I got shipped out. I was more like one and done, like, hey, did it. Cool.
I can say I did it.
Yeah, I got the medals for it, got the ribbons, and got some cool trophies. And, not that I was overzealous to be like, hey, I want to go. Or I wasn't also like, I don't want to go. I mean, that was never, something I wasn't trying to dodge it or anything like that. But so they shipped out, I think there was like 5 or 6 or 7 of us or something like that from my platoon that ended up going. And we were all like, kind of had senioritis. And it was just like, we're on our way out, dude. Like, I'm just going to do the bare minimums that I got to do. Like, fuck this. And so we get fabbed out to this other battalion, and there's a lot of like heart chargers there. They're like, oh, raw, like we're going to go do this and this. And we're like, all right, dude, we'll see you after lunch. Like we were just like, whatever. But I remember because we had guys that were, my rank to guys that had been in just as long as me that were like the bottom of the ranks structure. They were privates because they got in trouble and busted down. And I'll never forget, like, I had to get into some arguments with some other Marines from this other unit because they were harping on my guys about shit. And I'm like, you fucking leave them alone. Like, these are my privates. These are my private first classes. Like, you want to talk to them, you come through me. Like you're not
hazing type stuff, or was
not necessarily hazing, but it was more like, hey, everyone go start sweeping the parking lot. And they would come over and try to take I'm like, no, these are my guys. Like, I've got other plans for them, type of shit. Just kind of, taking care of them because I'm like, no, I'm not going to let you guys.
Because you're there. I mean, you're there working a job, like you have things to do at that time. So you go back over there and, you're in charge of these guys. I mean,
so I guess, yeah, and back up. That was before we actually shipped out. That was like when we were like gearing up to go. And then when we got out to Iraq, I instantly got separated from all my friends just because of my rank. They needed a platoon sergeant in Ramadi at the time. And they were like, hey.
Is Ramadi Iraq, or is that?
Yeah, Ramadi Iraq, okay. Yeah. And so then they pulled me to that, and I knew nobody there. And so then that's when I got put in charge of like 19 Marines. And then I had I had a lieutenant and a gunnery sergeant in charge of me. But so they would come down to me to like, hey, this is the mission that we're going to go on. Let's figure out what we need for equipment and yeah, what we need for equipment and manpower to handle this. And so then I was doing that, and it was kind of flattering. I was a sergeant, and at the time, like, to pick up the rank of sergeant was like 5-6 years, and I picked it up in like 3.5.
What was the reason for that?
I just kind of physical, like, so things to get promoted in the Marine Corps was like physical fitness is a huge one. Your rifle range scores is another contributor, and then just doing these like MCIs they're called, like Marine Corps something, like Marine Corps College Institute or something like that. I don't even
Different
know.
schools you could go to.
Yeah, it was like all these books, and so you just like read the books and then take the test, and again, I was never a book person. Like I didn't excel like in high school or anything like that. But to do some of these things, like to me, these are like,
It's like applicable stuff.
but these are like coloring books. So I'm like, this is really easy. Like I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna take the test, and no harm, no foul. If I fail it, who gives a shit? But if I pass it, then it goes towards my promotional scores. So I'm like, hell yeah, I'll take it and I'll do it.
Did you, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you or like harp too far down this, but did you have, like going in, did you have, not incentives, but like motive to rank up, or was it just kind of like as you were there, you're like, fuck it, I want to be as good as I can be? And
that's how I am. I was just like, I want to excel, I'm kind of money motivated. I think a lot of us are. Yeah. And so like you get promoted, you get pay raises. And so I was like, well, shit, I want to do that. I want to, get a pay raise. I want to go higher. And so like when I got promoted to sergeant, like I'm up against sergeants that had been in the Marine Corps for like, some of them had been in the Marine Corps for like 10 years. But they don't know any different. Like when we meet out in Iraq, and I joined the Marine Corps like a couple years later than most are joining at 18. So like when I'm 23, they're thinking I've been in for 5-6 years and think that I'm, more accelerated at, leadership and all this stuff. And I don't fucking have a clue.
There's a huge difference between a 20 and a 23-year-old though. It seems like,
yeah,
just like as you're maturing as a young dude. I mean,
and now we look at them and you're like, there's a huge difference between a 20-year-old and a 30-year-old and then a 40-year-old.
But sorry, I didn't mean to take you off that, but so you get promoted and then, so you're a sergeant on this second tour, and, you have your guys like on your day to day, then like, how are these orders coming into you? Or like, I don't know, just walk me through a little bit of like what your weeks look like when you're there. I mean, you get a set of shit you got to do, and then.
Yep. So I had 2 or 3 supply Marines that they handled like inbound supply stuff for the Marines at Camp Ramadi. I was in charge of them, but I kind of just let them do their own thing because I didn't know their job. And I was sure shit not going to sit there and try to tell them like, hey, you got to do this better, or hey, you need to be in there at that time. I'm like, you guys just take care of your shit. And
you good? I'm good.
Yeah, because I had not a clue. Like, and then I had the 2 other Marines that were above me that then they would kind of come down and say, hey, we're gonna work out with this unit, and this is the mission that we're going on. This is like how many like Jersey barriers, like these concrete barriers, or Texas barriers that we had too that were like 8-foot tall barriers. They'd say, we've got X amount of barriers we got to move. We've got X amount of HESCOs to fill. We've got X amount of feet of RPG fence to put up. What do you think it's going to take? And it's just like, all right, well, hey, let's take this many Marines, this equipment. And then it was also about what equipment we had that was still operational. Because like we had wheel loaders that were getting hit with gunfire. We had like, I made a little meme at one time, like little picture we had of one of our armored wheel loaders that had it was all on jack stands because it had no wheels, because we were running out of these O-rings for the tires, to mount the tires, because we were constantly getting flats. Well, then those O-rings you got to change out every time, and we're running out of O-rings. We're having to like steal them off of this other wheel loader and just park it. And it was like just cannibalize it because we needed parts. But
so you were the one that had the pulse on what was available to you guys.
Yep.
And so they would come to you and you're like, dude, I got fucking 3 of these, and that's it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And go in and set it up, and then have whatever our times are, and it's like, hey, meeting at 04, and we're leaving the wire at 06, and we're going to be gone for X amount of hours. And usually it was it's a 24-hour op, or it's a 12-hour op, or
mostly at night or during the day.
Both. So we would run 24/7. So like if we'd have like a 24-hour op, 48-hour op, like it's not that we're going out in the city, and Camp Ramadi was right on the city. So it was right there. So we would go out into the city and start setting up all these these barriers and stuff, building these combat outposts. But there was times that, like, I don't know how many times, like I saw the sun go up and go down in a 24-hour op, and I'm like, it's supposed to be but we don't have Apple Watches. You're not watching the time. We're just mission motivated, and it's like once we're done, we get to go home, and it's like so you see all this more shit that has to be done. But then it's like the sun would go down, and then the sun comes up, and then the sun goes down. It's like, what the hell? Like, how does this do this so many times in a 24-hour period? But it's not the fact that it was 20. It was like this turned into a 3-day op. And you're just eating when you can, and we'd have hot rats would be brought out to us at dinner time type frame to eat something good other than MREs and like all the junk food that family and friends and little kids send us from home.
Did you guys get into? I mean, did you have anything kinetic in that second deployment when you guys were out there, where you guys got into gunfights or anything like that? Yeah,
quite a bit more. My second deployment, but our whole mission was to build combat outposts in areas of the city that were high insurgent activity. So like
it wasn't
way above my pay grade, but like intel would come down and they would be monitoring I wouldn't say social media, but like the media out there, because like the insurgents have their own propaganda they're constantly pushing out to everybody. And so they're like literally having parades through like parts of town. And they're like, oh, the U.S. won't come here, blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, okay. So Intel's like, yep, nope. That's going to be a good neighborhood to drop a cop or combat outpost. And so they would do the research they would have, maps and highlighting, this building or these 3 buildings that we're going to secure and actually fortify. Because then what we would do is fortify them, and then there would be either Marines or Army units would literally do foot patrols. So they would live in this building for a month, and then they would do foot patrols out of that building, spreading that or dispersing that insurgent activity. So pushing them to another bad part of town, but I think we dropped like 11 cops in that 6-month time that I was there. So we would drop them all over the place and then just keep pushing them out to, be like, you're not wanted here.
So, I mean, it's probably safe to say, I mean, everyone if you're in a hot area like that, I mean, every time you were out, there was a really good chance that
there was a really good chance. Yeah. And if you went on one, and I mean, there was a couple that we went on that there was nothing, and it was almost like spooky. Like I think you were more on edge than you were when you'd get into a few minute firefight, and then shit would calm down. And then it's like 20 minutes later, it's like back to business. These other ones, it's like, something's not right. Like, why are we, and then especially when you wouldn't see any kids and people walking around or dogs or any of that stuff, like, then it's like, okay, like shit's about to go down, and it's almost like psychological warfare they're doing on us, just thinking like, hey, we're not going to fuck with them right now, but we're going to leave
suspense up.
Yeah, we're going to leave them all, on edge this whole time and wear them down that way. But we had, in the combat outposts, like, the intel would figure out what the best buildings are, but the insurgents also kind of on their counterinsurgency did a lot of the same shit. Like, we had one building that we went in that they had that thing rigged. And so I just remember going down the hallway, and the whole freaking entryway blew up like 30 feet behind me. And it was just like, I thought the building was coming down. It was a 3-story building. I thought, all concrete and shit. I thought that thing was coming down, and it's just like, fuck, where do we go? Do we go out into the backyard in this alleyway where there's all these other buildings that we don't have secure, and we don't know, are they pushing us out that way? Do we go back out the front?
Well, when the boom goes off, like you probably have no concept of, was that an RPG that just hit? Was it rigged to blow? Or do you kind of know? I mean, real time, you're just trying to figure shit out, I imagine.
A lot of times, RPG fire, like, we'd have people call out like RPG, so you hear someone like right before you hear it hit. Now, like the IEDs and shit, you just don't have a clue. I mean, it kind of
tell me more about that.
Knocks you stupid.
Like, how did that whole scenario play out? Like, you guys get there to set up your cop. You go into this building that you're going to use as like your main.
Yeah, we hadn't even set it up yet, so we were just in. This is like 10 o'clock in the morning on like, I think it was like a Thursday or something, and just like going in and like getting our bearings on like what's in here. Cause like for the cops, what we would do is like, we'd walk into this room, and all of this to us is trash. And so we'd get it all out, because if we leave it in here and say someone shoots that RPG through that window and catches that on fire, that's more of a hazard than anything. So we need to clear this room out, and then we'll set up like bunk beds and and we'll run our own utilities like power. So we'll have like little generators and then run power lines and like, fluorescent lights and shit they'd screw to the ceilings and stuff. So that way we're not relying on any outside source.
We need
It's like
equipment
we're
we know that
self-contained.
works. Yep.
But yeah, that one was just, we're all just kind of walking in, just kind of getting our bearings, and all of a sudden just all hell started breaking loose. And it was like, holy shit, like building's coming down, like this is the wrong fucking area. And like we were split up there was probably 4 or 5 different groups that we got split into, and we all kind of started as one. So, and that's what they want.
How many guys would there be? Sorry, I keep interrupting you, but like I'm trying to paint this picture in my head, and it just sounds fucking insane. But like, how many of you would be there? Like when you first get there, I assume there's X amount of people that go try to like clear the building first. Or are you assuming it's cleared when you get there? Because somebody else has already cleared it?
Yeah, there's units that are going like right in front of us, and they're clearing like that building, or if it's multiple buildings, they're clearing multiple buildings, but they're also clearing like damn near a city block around us initially. Yeah. Now they let those other people back in, but initially it's like, get everyone the hell away from us because we don't know who's good, who's bad. Just
gotcha. So the assault guys go out, they're doing their clearing and shit,
Yep.
and then some of the locals,
and then we'll have people post up security. So we'll have like Humvees or 7-ton trucks like that are just kind of strategically placed. Sometimes if we were with the Army, they'd have like Abrams tanks out there. So the tank's sitting right here, just posting up, watching
feel
down
good about
this.
that guy sitting out there.
Yeah, watching down that road, and it's like, yeah, you don't want to be at the other end of that if they want to shoot at you. But yeah, you'd have that, and then from there, it's just like everyone kind of has their, like, we were the heavy equipment operators, so like we would come in and, okay, so let's start unloading our wheel loaders, or start unloading whatever we need to do, the Jersey barriers and shit, start staging stuff up, and then whoever the unit was that we were like tacked onto or helping out, like I'd usually report to whoever their commander was to say, hey, we've got this and this and this going on, and then they would have, depending on who the unit is, like some of them would have like 20 extra guys. So it's always nice because like, shit, we got 40 tons of sandbags that we need to carry into this building, and 5 of us aren't carrying. Yeah, more the merrier. Let's just get it done and get it done quick. And which kind of, to me, sucked too sometimes because I was like kind of not high on my horse, but I was like, I'm a sergeant. Like I shouldn't have to do that, grunt work and that piddly shit, but then I've got like some Army captain that's coming up to me and he's carrying sandbags and asking me for guidance, like, hey, how should we set this up? We're trying to figure out this serpentine, and I'm like, oh shit. It's kind of humbling at the same time though. It's like, damn, like he's looking up to me, and it's like, this should be the other way around. But
it's sort of the beauty of the military though, I suppose. Like people have their special areas of expertise, and I mean, that's kind of the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Yeah. And especially, when people, know when to ask for help, that's a big thing too, is just not being, overly, thinking you know it all, or
like too proud, or just like letting ego kind of stand in the way of like just what's the best for the mission.
Absolutely.
I think that probably happens a lot.
Yeah. We've seen a lot of that shit happen, and it's like, dude, we fucked this up because you held your foot to the ground and said, no, this is the way we're going to do it. And
more eager to be right, or to have it my way versus what's actually right for the mission.
Yeah. Overly confident in the wrong reasons. And
let's get to the part then where you were kind of getting there before, when you were talking about like the idea for CTS and just like what that scenario was, and then sort of like the evolution of like how that prepared you for starting your business and like that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So we went in and found out that this house had been overruled by, again, the insurgents they had their counterinsurgency. They have their own ideas on how to handle things, and they were doing the same kind of similar stuff as we were. And we noticed going into this house that something wasn't right from the start. Just, it felt ransacked. You could tell like it wasn't the normal house that we went in, to where they would, have little family mementos on things, and, some food in the kitchen and stuff like that. And this one, it was just, everything was like cleared out, but there was a bedroom just full of shit. And it was like everything in that house. Well, looking back, we were talking, we're like, well, the insurgents they obviously took over this house and they killed this family. So we found the bodies underneath all this stuff. And we're like, excuse me, they obviously weren't just going to throw all this shit outside, because then everyone's going to know, like, why is there this big pile of shit? And there is good Iraqis. There was, good people that live there that would tell on the bad people. They would narc them out. They would come up to us, and we're on missions and, say there's bad guys down there. And
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys are just farmers living in farming communities, right? Like, I mean, for the most part, or I mean,
somewhat,
just very rural, like.
I mean, they did everything. I mean, we worked with a guy that he had a little auto maintenance shop, like a Midas or something, type of thing. He had employees and he had vehicles and he had, all this shit. And these are cities. I mean, I don't know how big Ramadi is. A couple 100,000 people. So it's obviously more than just, the farming community, but there's schools, there's stores, there's, administrative type, jobs and stuff that they do. But yeah, and back to this deal, it's like, so once our initial task was just to get rid of this trash, all this furniture and property, and get it outside. And usually what we do is just throw it out back and throw some JP8 fuel on it and burn it real quick. And, it's gone, out of sight, out of mind. Or if the people were still around, we'd move it outside and they'd have their whole family come and they'd load up their, they bring in a huge semi, they throw all this shit in the back of it and drive off. But this one, we found some feet hanging out and it was like, whoa. And then that's when we realized, once we started peeling it back, but it was like nobody wanted to take the responsibility for the bodies, because we're like, fuck, this isn't our deal. Like, we didn't shoot these people, like, out of, not my problem type of thing. But ultimately we bagged them, we put them outside, and but once we removed them and we started moving shit, like, you couldn't smell a dead body then. But once we started moving shit, then it was like, oh, fuck. And we're like, damn, like, someone's got to live in this room. And it's like kind of a tile floor type deal. And I'm like, there's body fluids all over. And I'm like, fuck. So I had also taken in the Marine Corps, I had taken between my first and second deployments, I took a bunch of hazmat classes. And so one of the guys, because we're always talking about it, what are you going to do when you get out? And I was like, oh, I'm, probably do something hazmat. And one of the guys like, hey, Sergeant K, you're a hazmat Marine. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm like looking at him, I'm like, hazmat is more like, in the Marine Corps, it's like fuel spills, oil spills, like paint, batteries, shit like that. I'm like, this is a biohazard. Like, this is different. But I got with our corpsman, our doc that was on that mission with us, and he pulls out a Ziploc baggie of a bunch of latex gloves, and he tosses me and another guy some gloves, and we just start literally, like, took towels and, like, just anything that could be absorbent, and I'm, like, just mopping up this muck, this just goo. And, at the time I, wasn't really like, what the hell is all in, but it's all, oily and just nasty, and mopping it up, and I'm just, like, damn near gagging and shit. And we took, like, every chemical they had in this house, and, like, they have, like, Tide laundry soap and Clorox bleach. It's in Arabic, but the label, you can recognize it. Like, it's a little bit different,
Like,
has a little twist to it, but like, this is Tide laundry soap. Yeah. And so I just remember we're just out there just dumping anything and everything. We probably put like 5 or 6, 7 different chemicals down, like, probably making some sort of toxic, deadly gas, not even knowing it, but it smelled better and it was working. So it was like, let's just do it, And I remember our noses were burning when we were doing it, but I was like, I don't know if it's like the dead body smell or the chemicals, and it really didn't matter to us, but it looked good. So we mop all this shit up, throw all the bloody towels and everything out in the back and burn that. And looking back now, I'm like, that was like totally like the wrong way of doing it. Like, those bodies had been there for a while. Like, I guarantee, like, but hell, like, we were in and out in a few days, and then it was, I don't remember now on that one if it was an Army or Marine unit was living in that. So, like, there was guys probably 6 or 8 guys living in that room after that. So I don't know if the smells came back, if the bodily fluids came back up through the porous grout. Like, I have no idea. Not my problem anymore. But that was one thing that I did, and we started talking about it after, and it was like, who does this back in the United States? Like, just thinking crime scenes, like, the police shoot and kill somebody. Who cleans that up? Do the cops do it? And then fast forward into, a couple of years later, I mean, that was probably around November, December of 2006 that I'd done that cleanup, and then it was 2009, March of 2009, I opened up the doors of CTS Cleaners.
When you're in that I mean, when that happens, like you've seen dead bodies. You said patrolling or like when you're moving through the city or down roads or whatever. And you mentioned that you sort of get desensitized to it, but like in that moment, was there an element of like, because you're in their home, right? So like there's a personal feel to it, a family, like, I don't know. I mean, did that one hit different or did it like, and not to like stir up bad shit, but I mean, like, or was it again just kind of like I'm here to do my fucking job? Like I didn't do it. I shouldn't feel guilty. Like I don't
No,
know.
it was more. It's more like these are just carcasses. Like it wasn't like this is a person, like at all. It didn't feel that way. Um, Again, I think your mind protects people in a way to try to censor some shit out. And for that, I mean, I don't remember being like, oh my gosh, this is someone's husband or wife or
Yeah. I mean,
whatever.
there's
It was just
morticians too, right? Like I mean,
exactly
there's an entire industry around dealing with dead people.
there is.
But I just like that being maybe sort of like the first intimate, like, I don't know. To me, it's just different driving in a Humvee down the road and like maybe a body of a bad guy gets run over, or whatever. To me, that's different than like physically moving a family and then like cleaning up their blood and stuff is more intimate.
Yeah.
Right? So like, I just didn't know if that element was any different, but I
think
suppose you just deal with it.
Also, the fact that there was a group of us, there was two of us cleaning it up, but there was like 8 or 10 guys there when the bodies were getting removed. So it wasn't like, to me, I think you would get more intimate with the situation if it was just me in this room doing this by myself and like letting my mind wander or like dig into that. Where then it's like we're sitting there like shooting the shit about, I don't even know, probably some
whatever
Haji
Marines talk
film we
about.
just watched the night
Yeah.
before, bootleg movie we just watched or something. Like I don't even remember what was even being said then. So I mean, obviously it wasn't any of relevance, but and that's like even now, like when we go out on jobs, it's like we're usually working in teams, and so it's not like someone's just in there, because your mind can get the best of you if you allow it to, and
Do you have conversations and we could talk a little, I want to make sure we talk a little bit about like the business side of things and getting CTS off the ground and all that stuff. But while we're on that topic, I mean, do you up front have conversations with your team members? Is that like normal practice in your work where you're like sort of mentally preparing for, hey, we're going to potentially see some shit here, guys, or like, I don't know, or is it just you sign up knowing what you're getting into? Because it could mess with somebody walking in and seeing a dead body or
yeah, on the larger scale of things, like when people get hired on with us, like, they know what we do, so it's just like it's inevitable, like you're gonna find a dead body. Now it happens probably every couple months we get a job and the body's still there, or well, more than that, probably every month, every couple weeks, even sometimes. Now whether we actually physically see them or like we had one here recently a couple weeks ago in an apartment building, the body was still there. A management company calls us, hey, we got a dead body. We'll be there. Well, they're waiting on the funeral home to get there to remove the body, but my guys are all standing outside, like chomping at the bits, like, hey, let's get cleaning this up. But it's like, hey, we got to wait for the body to be removed. Like, my guys didn't see the body, but we have had them before where it's like, you probably will, see a body. And at that point, like, if it's a newer technician, I try to like brief them, like, hey, you don't got to go in there if you don't want to. Like, that's a whole nother level of this, that it's like, I don't want to force you to see a dead body if you don't want to. Obviously you're going to see the aftermath. You're going to see everything that they left behind and you can paint your own picture. But also it's like seeing a dead body isn't like seeing your relative at a funeral where they're all like prepped and, looking up at you and stuff like that. And it's like, these bodies are, sometimes they're deformed and not mutilated in physical, like someone did that to them, but
decomposed
like,
to a
they're
certain degree
decomposing.
already.
It's like, so if they're like laying with their head in a certain position for 10 days, like their
Rigor
body,
mortis.
yeah, and their body sets into that, or they fall between like the toilet and the bathtub and they're all like contorted. And it's just like, that's not natural to see. It's not like they're just like, laying there in the coffin, the casket. But yeah, with our guys, I mean, And then as far as like briefing them, before, I mean, there's certain things like we get a lot of high profile type projects that, people hear about it. It was on the news and stuff like that. And it's just like, we kind of got to go through the same like little, talk about, hey, again, remember, like, don't say anything to the media, because you'll have these people with cameras right in your face. Like, what did you see in there? How many shots were fired,
Is that more of a thing that's like out of respect potentially for the family members and stuff?
To us, it's that. It's out of respect for the family members. And like I told my staff, I'm like, yeah, this is something that's interesting as a bar story for you to go home tonight and tell your friends and shit. But remember, at the end of the day, like, this was someone's family member, and the information that we have is shit that a lot of people don't know. And the people that want to know, they only want to know it because, I like watching Dateline and I like watching the murder mystery shows and I want to know all the details. I want to know, and it's like, how many shots were fired in that house? I'm like, it doesn't matter, because they want to know, was there just one shot fired, or is it going to make their story if I say, hey, there was 15 shots fired?
Or was it Scarface up in there?
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Someone, like, holy shit, it's bad. It's like, there's body parts everywhere, and it's like, but to me, it's our job. We got to stay professional. It's our career field, and we can't jeopardize all that for some, I'm sure any of these local news stations would take my stories and run with it, and it might make the news for a day or two, and then it's gone. And it's like, what did that really get me? It's, it's in and out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what's it? So you 2006 then is when you're done?
2007.
2007 you're done? Or yeah, you got in February of 2003. And so then 2007 you got your 4 years in. What's that look like getting out? Is it like is it melodramatic in a sense where all of a sudden it's just like, okay, I no longer work for the government and I guess I'll go figure out what I'm going to do? I mean, like, because I have no fucking concept of
it. It was very surreal feeling, because you go from having something that you're living this life every single day, and being in the military, you're devoting 7 days a week. Like, there's not, yes, you have like when you're in states, you're not in combat, you're not, doing any of that shit. Yeah, you're working typically Monday through Friday, 7 to 4:30 or whatever. But you're still committed even on the weekends, that if something were to happen, you're still watching your P's and Q's. You're not going to go get a drunk driving charge. You're not going to go get a fight at the bar, because like, you're still being held to a higher level. You're still being held accountable for things. And then all of a sudden that day happens that it's just like, holy shit, I'm free. Like, nobody has control over me. Like, obviously, within legal constraints, it's like I can't just go out and start shooting people or, doing something stupid. But it's just like, holy shit, like, I don't have that parent, like in the Marine Corps, you still have whoever is in charge of you is still looking over you, and they're still going to chew your ass on Monday if you got in any sort of trouble, or you were 5 minutes late, or you overslept. Like in the military, like in the Marine Corps especially, there is no, oh, I'm not feeling good this morning, I'm not going to make it in. It's like, no, we have PT at 06. You're still showing up at 06, and then you're going to go to sick call at 7:30. So you're still getting up with the rest of us. It's not just like, I just want to lay in bed.
You can potentially physically be able, like, not be able to perform, and then that's what you'll go do. But you're still getting there.
You still have to be there. Yeah, you're not just, like any other job out there. You call, oh, I'm not feeling good. You guys don't want to catch what I've got at the office. And the Marine Corps, it's like, no, I don't give a shit. I'll catch it and it'll make me stronger. Like, you're coming out here.
Yeah.
But when you get out though, that's like.
But going in though, I mean, with that, because like going in, because you said you're running a lawn care business, and a lot of people weren't maybe taking you as seriously as you would have liked just because of your age and stuff. I mean, was that like sense of purpose? And I don't mean to like plant ideas or words, I guess, in your mouth, but I mean, was that something that you sort of like sought out or knew going in, or? Because that sense of purpose also has to feel good to a certain extent, of like just knowing that like I have to go do my job to make sure all of this runs, And so I don't know, just what's that like, I guess? Or I mean, was that something you sought out, or is it something that inherently just becomes part of your day?
I think it inherently became part of it. But at first it was more like I was looking for something to fast forward my life. Like 4 or 5 years where I was like older, more mature, where people would hold me more professional and say, okay, yeah, I'll write a contract with this guy to take care of our $100,000 a year account. You know, where when I'm 19 years old, they're just like, you know, you want to write a big account for 50 or 100 grand. And they're just like, yeah.
So you're like, I'll buy some time.
I'll
get
buy some
legitimate
time. Yeah.
experience.
But I had no idea what other doors and opportunities I was going to open. And then what confidence also that the Marine Corps would instill on me. So like when I got out, I mean, I was like hitting the ground running and like got back into lawn care and was able to instantly like start getting SBA loans and I was writing business plan. Like I felt like I had it all like made and I'm like, all these people like don't even know me and they're signing contracts for commercial complexes and townhome associations and
you were pretty squared away though at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then it just, I mean, not that I was ever, you know, even growing up, I was never the one that would sleep until 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock. You know, I was always up, you know, doing something, you know, kind of like self, you know, diagnosed like ADHD. Like I feel like I always got to be doing something and doing a million things. And
just a doer.
Yeah. So, but like when I got out of the Marine Corps, it was like I felt like I had so much more ammo, like so much more like behind me to, you can do this and, you know, there's nothing that's going to stop.
Was it hard or maybe even still to this day to not judge people who sort of seem like they're just getting by after being in an environment like that? Like, and again, I don't want to plant this necessarily in your head or steer the conversation, but I wonder myself, if I was in an environment like that, I think it would be hard for me to like just see a buddy of mine. Actually, I'm still kind of this way this day without even being a part of the military. Like it drives me insane to see people just not
doing
anything.
Oh, it drives me nuts. And I've got buddies out there that it's like they're just getting by. And I'm like, dude, you did so much. Like where did all your motivation go? Like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you know, when you got out of the Marine Corps, you know, you could set the world on fire and now you don't give a shit, you know, just living in some shitty apartment. Like you had everything at that moment that I had. We were equal. Like how did, and not even to act like I'm doing way better than some people. I mean, there's some military members that are, I mean, fucking CEOs of Fortune 100 companies, but it's like, there's so much more you could have done. Like, why are you just, you're one step from being homeless and why? And then to me, there are some certain things that kind of get on, like grind my gears basically, you know, it's just some of the people that try to hold these like crutches, like, oh, you know, I've got PTSD, you know, and it's like, oh, where'd you serve? Well, I didn't, you know, and it's like, you got PTSD from hearing like secondary from like other people's stories and that shit tore you up. And so now you can't go work a fucking job. You can't go start a business. Like why? Like you don't have the self-motivation to do it. That's what it is.
Yeah. And that's sort of like, I could see that, or I have empathy for that feeling because, you know, it's not, I don't know if devalue is the right word, but like, don't diminish like what it is that I actually went through or what they like these other guys went through to like latch on to a feeling that you're trying to use as a crutch. Like that's not your valor to steal.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, is that kind of the feeling of it?
It is.
I mean, like, cause I can see that being extremely difficult.
Well, and it's one, yeah. And the big thing to me is like when they're using that as like, as a crutch or like as an excuse as to why they can't do, well, you don't understand. No, I do understand. And it's like, I understand, I adapted and I overcame. Like that's what we were trained to do is adapt and overcome. You figure out how to get past it. You figure out how to work with what you got and move forward. And you know, you can always build from there. And same with like, not to sound like a grouchy veteran, but like you get the veterans and, you know, they're like, oh, I can't find a job. And it's just like, why can't you find a job? Are you putting yourself in a spot? Are you using the veteran thing as a crutch to say that you should be entitled to doing something? It's like, dude, do what you got to do. Get out there, you know, get out there and hunt, get out there and find a job. Like you've been given all the tools and all the opportunities in your life. And I'm kind of biased because I'd rather hire all veterans myself. But I do see, you know, shitty people, you know, people that make a lot of bad decisions in life. You know, they go out and they drink and drive and do drugs and do other things. And it's like, you didn't necessarily do the drugs because you're a veteran. So don't try to carry that.
Do you have any friends specifically that you've had to sort of help, or, I mean, because transitioning back home for a lot of people is, I want to make sure, and I know you're not intending it this way, but I want to make sure for anybody that's listening, like PTSD is real for some people, and they do struggle with self-hate and different things that they were asked and forced to do, that they have to deal with internally, and it's not always the healthy way in which they deal with it. But I mean, is there any specific situations where you've had to sort of lend a helping hand or have some chats with people?
Yeah, a few times. And back to, you know, not downplaying PTSD by any means at all with this, because everybody's built a little different. Their minds are built different. How they're able to cope with things, deal with things, talk about things. You know, some people won't talk about anything they saw. You know, they're ashamed of it or whatever. And there's certain things there that, you know, that help escalate that PTSD for those reasons. And I understand, like, people that have legitimately have PTSD. It's like, you know, you need help, but you got to get the help, and you got to ask for help if you, you know, think you want it or need it. But don't go around saying, well, I have this problem, but I'm not willing to help it, you know, myself. You know, I can't go around and say, well, I can't do this because my knee hurts. Well, have you gone to the doctor? No. You know, what? Come on, man. You know, let's be real here.
I do love the adapt and overcome thing, though. In preparation, you were sort of the first one that I reached out to, and you wanted to come on. And knowing your background, I've wanted to, as I go through this, I think it's important to self-educate as much as you can, just to hold your own in a conversation. But also, I wanted to do the conversation justice for you, also, just to inquire enough of the right questions, right? But one of the things that I constantly hear from any branch, I don't care if they're special forces, what they are, is like, Marines fucking go, you know. And I think that's awesome. Of like, I mean, you hear it all the time. It's just like, man, we came up on these Marine dudes, and those guys are fucking like go guys, like, you know. And it's like,
well, they kind of, yeah. I mean, people say, like, you get brainwashed, you know, in the Marine Corps and stuff like that, and I don't know how to even respond to that sometimes, but it is, you know, people say, like, the Marine Corps is a cult, and I can see that, like, trying to be an outsider perspective. And it's like,
objectively.
Yeah, it's like, you know, Marines always put bumper stickers on their cars, you know, or the little EGA on their cars. So, like, everyone knows, hey, that's a Marine. Everyone gets a Marine Corps tattoo. You know, I've got friends that are in other branches of service that don't have a tattoo of their branch of service. They're just like, well, it was like 4 years of my life. You know, it's like someone playing, you know, D1 football. They don't have a, you know, a tattoo of the mascot on their arm or anything like that. But I don't know. There's just something different about Marines on, you know, how we're wired and how we go, you know, through training to have that. I mean, the camaraderie is one thing, but just having it instilled that, you know, you're a Marine, it's, you know, something that's earned, not given. Yeah, it's just, it's a whole different thing. And I mean, and just going to like Army bases when we're in Iraq, like, it was almost like we held our head up a little bit higher as we were walking through. And it's like, there's some badass fucking dudes here. Like, you got special forces guys that are way, you know, more badass, high speed, low drag than we are. There's, you know, SEALs. I mean, we had missions that were out with Navy SEALs, and, like, we didn't even know these fuckers are out there. And they're like a block away from us. And we're like, why weren't you guys jumping in on this firefight? And we're talking with them at the chow hall, and they're like, yeah, was that you guys? It was, you know, and it's like, yeah, where the fuck were you, dude? They're like, oh, we're not going to, you know, give off our position. You know, we're observing. You know, if they started, you know, licking you guys, we would have jumped in. But you guys were handling it. And it's like, fuck, dude. You know, it's like getting in a fight, watching your buddy kick someone's ass, but you're not going to jump in. You're just, yeah, like, go ahead, dude. You know?
I get it, though. I mean, they potentially are on a different. Yeah, I mean, that would be extremely difficult. I mean, Matt being a Green Beret, I need to get him talked into just sitting down and hearing some of his stories too. But you know, being in the Army, yeah, there's just different levels of stuff. I think it is cool, and the reason why I bring it up is, since I've known you in the last couple of years, I mean, you're a fucking go guy. You know, what I mean, you're talking about pulling 24-hour shifts over in Iraq, and the first thing that came to mind is like, I'll see you a Snapchat of you moving snow at fucking 2 o'clock in the morning, and then I'll see you like the next day at 9 o'clock in the morning, like doing CTS stuff, and it's like this guy just doesn't fucking quit, you know.
Yep.
I mean, you have a different gear, and a lot of that is the type of person you are. But I imagine, yeah, that Marine background probably has something to do with that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Just sleep when I'm dead. I mean, obviously you got to get rest, but you know, it's like if there's a task at hand, it's like I'm going to get it done. I'm not going to say, well, I'm only working 8 hours today. Work 8 hours, then I'll figure it out tomorrow. It's like for me, for a lot of the stuff I do, it's like if I wait till tomorrow, it's gone. Like you can't make up the time.
A lot of people don't understand that about being a business owner, an entrepreneur of any kind. Not to like abuse military terms, but when duty calls, you know,
Yep,
like
exactly.
it's just, you got to fucking get it done.
Yep.
So, well, let's just to kind of wrap this up though. I want you to give a chance to talk about CTS a little bit more and just what that looked like getting it started. We're probably approaching Rogan hours at this point. But you know, so you come back, you're doing the lawn care thing, things are rolling along pretty good, but like, I mean, how do you make that transition back to dealing with dead people?
So it was always in my head. It was always something I wanted to start up, and I'd been doing some research, but it's not the type of business like starting a lawn care business where you just go out and buy a mower and a trimmer and a truck and trailer and say, hey, I'm going to start cutting grass. And when I was doing the lawn care, I was more on sales, business development. I wasn't out actually physically cutting grass. I would drive a plow truck here and there in the wintertime, but it wasn't like I could be devoted to like one single account. I was more bouncing around, managing everything. And I had simply got bored with it. And I was like, you know, there's a million of these companies out here. Every year there's a new company that, you know, pops up, or, you know, that's not true. There's 50 new companies or 30 new companies each year that would pop up. And this is back in the Yellow Page days when I, you know, scan through the new Yellow Page, you know, phone book and, oh, this is new, this is new, this is new. And I was like, this is just kind of a, I don't know, just not for me type of business. Again, I always had the CTS thing kind of in my head. And so doing the research on it and finally was like, okay, you know, I think I can kind of kick this off, you know, on a little bit of a shoestring budget. And I was like, well, I've got a pickup. I've got an enclosed trailer that's not marked up that we can kind of use. And I went out and bought a van. I already had a warehouse for our lawn care equipment, actually right up the street here. And I was like, well, you know, I can kind of have low overhead at that point. And started it up, and just me and a couple other guys, all of us were part-time, like nobody was full-time. And went through that first year and had 27 jobs. And I'm like, dang, I think if I could do 50 jobs, I could do this full time. And because obviously you got to have money. Like I can't just live off of what 27 jobs paid us. But I was like, if we do 50 jobs, I'm like, that's like one job a week. I think I can do it. And we had like 70 something jobs our second year. And so
How did you like boots on the ground, even as a part-timer though? I mean, so you have the equipment available and you decide that like, you know, this is the profession, but I mean, like I'm in the construction business. I know how to find those customers. Like I mean, how do you make that integration into we clean up this stuff?
yeah, that was the hard part. Cause back when I started, there wasn't, you know, these training companies out there that would tell you how to market your company. Yeah. And it was like, you go to talk to anyone about Google AdWords and they're like, you're selling what? You know, like, oh, you know, yeah, we can do this. So it's really just kind of guerrilla marketing, just going out and knocking on doors. And I was talking to first responders, law enforcement and sheriff's departments and funeral homes, and just, you know, talking to people saying, hey, what do you guys do when you guys, you know, for the funeral homes and you guys remove this body? What do you guys do if there's still a mess? Oh, we don't know. You know, I'm like, well, hey, would you mind recommending my company?
Was the common answer that there really just wasn't like a precedent or a standard for what would happen? I mean, it's just kind of like, well, I know this guy and sometimes he does it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. And there was companies out there that would dabble in it. You know, they would take the random death call as they would get it, but they weren't specializing in it. And that's what I found was a big need, was people that can show up that are caring, compassionate to the situation. So this isn't, like your companies that clean up floods and fires and they're like, oh, your basement flooded. Hey, Derek, we're going to come in. We're going to get you all taken care of today. Well, we can't be all that chipper and, everything when we show up and someone's 16-year-old son committed suicide in front of them. And it's just like
the etiquette that goes along with that is different. Yeah.
it is. And then how to handle just the operations when you're there, what you're talking about, like what the crew members are talking about while they're cleaning this up. We're not going to be like, hey, man, make sure you get that brain that's up in the ceiling, or hey, did you get that tooth that was stuck in the wall? Like, we can't say that if there's family still in the house because we don't know what grandma is thinking. What grandma just knows that little Billy shot himself in the bedroom, but now she's hearing us saying, hey, get the tool or the tooth stuck out of the ceiling. Why is this tooth, oh my gosh, what happened? And so it's like you've just got to watch what you say, and then also on how you communicate with the client. We can't go in there and I'm sure I can say some of it here, but it's just not like, oh yeah, we're going to clean the brain matter off the ceiling. It's like we've got to clean. We're just going to keep it kind of Barney style. We're going to clean the ceiling. We're going to clean the walls. We've got to remove the carpet. Well, why do you got to remove the carpet? Well, there's blood and bodily fluids saturated through the carpet into the subfloor. Like we got to remove all that material to properly remediate the area. Where some people are like, oh, he was laying on the bed. Yeah, well, the blood ran down the headboard and into the carpet. You don't want to get too graphic with them. Kind of leave it a little bit vague, but that's just one of those things that, we got to explain to our techs and supervisors on how to communicate with the client. And again, we just don't want to do things that are graphic or like open any wounds that are barely healing with the family that maybe the family did see them. Because we'll get them too where they'll say, oh, there's just a little bit of blood in the room. And they may have had tunnel vision when they walked in and saw this person laying there deceased. Their mind is shutting down to where it's just focusing on the one, and they're not looking up at the ceiling. They're not looking at the window ledge. They're not seeing that there's a hole through the window.
And it's probably better off that you just let them have that be the last image.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like we don't want to paint a picture for them to say, well, did you not look at the ceiling? It's like we're going to take care of it. Like, let's just shut the door, and, we'll take care of it in there. But that's kind of what separates us from the other companies. And then I network with a lot of other companies too that do that flood fire kind of cleanup too, because they get those occasional death calls or trauma calls. And I found out over the years that a lot of them were like, well, it's great you guys are around because our guys didn't actually like doing those jobs. And you guys like doing them? I'm like, well, I wouldn't really say we like doing them, but this is what we do. We're able to do them. And so it's like, yeah, just send those our way and we'll take care of them and keep your client, satisfied with you. We'll take the reins and keep them, satisfied and get things cleaned up, put back together, and try to keep their lives moving forward.
I think you made mention of it, I think, early on, but we didn't really dive into it. So, you've sort of created, or, the industry has gone to a way where the niche for taking care of that sort of stuff is what you do. Who does pay for it when there's bodily fluids that need to be cleaned up?
So a lot of times, sometimes insurance pays for it. So homeowners insurance, auto insurance, their business insurance, their structure policies. And then sometimes it's just out of pocket. Sometimes, like, let's say it's an apartment complex and they may have a $250,000 deductible. Well, this $2,000 cleanup isn't going to even shake a stick at that. So they just have to, swallow it and pay for it. And then there's, when you get into certain situations like actual crimes, homicides, stuff like that, the state of Iowa Attorney General's office does have a crime victim compensation program that will pay for, like, I think it's $1,000 of out-of-pocket expense. So let's say someone comes into your house and murders somebody, and say you have a $500 deductible, but say it's a $5,000 job. Your insurance is picking up the lion's share. The state will pick up that $500 for you. So there's other options, and we'll do, depending on the situation, some payment arrangements we'll set up with people too if they're kind of in some financial hardship. That.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I worked in the insurance game for a while, but typically with weather events, it's sort of deemed like an act of God, but in a like homicide scenario, it's definitely something that you did not bring on yourself, right? And so is that why the state kind of kicks in and steps in and it's like, or I guess where I'm going with that is, do insurance companies, are they combative with that stuff at all, or are they pretty like?
Not with us. We're very fair on our billing. Now, I've seen projects that we probably would have done for 5 or 8,000 that another company's charging $100,000, and so it's like there's where you get excessive on it. Again, we're very fair on our billing. We have everything documented, so it's like here's all your stuff. It's not a cheap service, but there's also a lot of consumable, disposable items that we're using once and they're throwing them away. It's like we're not reusing this scraper or this scrub brush on one job to go clean another one. We're not bringing anything that could be potentially contaminated into your house. Everything's coming in new. But with the state, they get that funding from the offenders. So if you go to jail for some crime, they make you pay a penalty or not a penalty. You got to pay an amount to like this crime victim fund. So it's like drunk drivers got to pay $100 into it or whatever. And so it's all this, it's money from there. So it's not like taxpayer money. It's not like your money or your tax or my taxes are paying for the cleanup of, of a homicide scene.
Is retribution the right word? There's a word for what I can't think about it. But anyway, doesn't matter.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. This
but
starts with R.
The term for the money that they have to pay. Lastly, I guess, I mean, that whole deal, it's awesome. I love the fact that you're just like, you had an experience. You even mentioned you were talking about it with your Marine buddies. Like, yeah, who the hell does do this? Like even in that situation, right? And then to apply that back home, I mean, that's just awareness in a sense of, I mean, starting a business is literally as simple as there's a problem that it doesn't seem like other people can either figure out or figure out very well. And it's like, if I solve that problem, I now have a business, right? Like it's just that simple. And so I think it's cool that it was sort of being taken care of, but not really very well. And you're like, well, there's a business.
Let's perfect this a little bit.
Yeah.
Hone it down. Yeah.
Make it a legitimate, like industry or sector.
Yeah.
Of the cleanup scenario.
All at the same time, having no idea to what it was going to amount to.
Yeah. Did you have, I guess you started it, but I mean, how many employees do you have now?
We've got 7 total on payroll.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. I mean, if I could bring everything back down and have like just simply be like me and one other person, I would be completely fine with managing that, because it's kind of grown, not to say it's grown to become a monster by any means, but it's grown to where I've outgrown some of our processes without having a different way in place. It's like now it's like we definitely need an office person, and I should have started that 10 years ago. But now it's to the point where when I do hire an office person, we can't figure out how to get them caught up and spun up to where we are.
Spun up.
Yeah.
Military terms.
Oh, it's back. It's just like, and it's like,
yeah.
I feel like every person I have, clerks and stuff, it's like I'm doing their job, and then it's like, and then I get frustrated with it too, because then I'm like, well, what's the point? What's the point of me paying you $20 an hour to sit here and try to write these estimates and these invoices, and when I'm doing it all for you anyways? So it's like, and it's taking time out of my day, and I'm doing it slower to try to get you to understand how to do it. And
delegation, and specifically in that capacity of office billing, financials, that area is extremely difficult. And we're literally at 7 employees right now with all of us, like in that same boat, where it's like with Showtime Homes, it's tough because it's always a chicken and the egg thing with business. And there's literally no textbook to tell you like you hit X amount of revenue and you're X amount profitable and this is what you do next. Yep. And you're constantly trying to figure out, are we taking care of our clients the way that we need to and should, like as with just morally, I guess, and just like doing a good business act. So like, are we doing a good job? And then are we doing it profitably? And if we're not doing it profitably, like what needs to happen to do that? Like, can we hire somebody to be more efficient at this? But then obviously payroll costs money. So now we got to go get more jobs. Well, how do we go get more jobs? Are we gonna, if we go get more jobs, are our field guys now overwhelmed? Are we gonna have to hire more field guys? And do we just take away all that profitability?
Well, and it's trying to find a way to scale. Like within all of our staff, some are part time, some are full time, and that's the big thing too, is trying to find that happy balance of even part timers that started out as part timers 5 years ago that now don't want to show up to anything. And it's just like, what's the point of me keeping you on? And it's like, if you're not going to put in the hours, I'm going to replace you. And then you get nothing. But then also, like, we've got part-timer right now working darn near full-time hours. But then he's kind of concerned if we hire another, because I'm trying to hire at least another 1 or 2 more full-time staff members. And it's like, well, if we do that, he's like, "Am my hours going to get cut back?" And it's like, well, I don't want to make you make that jump to say you want to go full-time and push your other things to the side. But
I also have to look out for my business.
We got to look out for the business.
Else.
Yeah. And just again, having that happy balance where we're an incident-based service. So it's not, every day that we have something going on. Like right now, I think the crews are out on, I think they've got 5 projects today going on, but then there's other days that we might have 1. And it's like, can't put 4 guys on one project.
But you have to be ready.
But we have to be ready when something does happen. And so it's like, kind of it's a double-edged sword, because if we get called to something and it's, an emergency in the lobby of an apartment building and they need you there now, I can't say, hey, let me ramp up some staff. We'll be there on Thursday. It's no, we've got to be there now and show force. And so, luckily, fortunately enough, we've been able to ramp up our equipment where equipment-wise we're there. It's like sometimes we got to, have a bigger show for us and send out 4 vans or 4 vehicles, so it looks like we got 10 people there. But it's like, nope, there's just each person's driving their own separate vehicle.
Still getting the job done.
Still get the job done. Yeah.
Maybe it's just a little bit more effort out of each individual, which is the tough part for billing in that industry too. Is a lot of times when you look at like what is fair billing practices, it's like, well, what does it cost for me to be ready when the situation calls for it? And is there overhead inherently involved in that? Mm-hmm. And so like the per job and per hour basis may look like an overcharge, but it's like, in order to be equipped to do that, I had to have, you know what I mean? Like,
it's like, we're not billing out,
guys.
Of 40, a average person working 40 hours on payroll, there's not 40 billable, production hours. There might be 25, 30, 32. If we're really lucky, you might hit 30, 32. So it's like you have all this administrative time, basically. It's, when they're coming into the office and, from the time they clock in and they start, checking out their vehicles and you go through all their paperwork to see what they have going on for the day. When they get back at the end of the day and do all their logs and their paperwork and turn everything in, it's like, there's a lot of, go to the bathroom. It's like all this stuff you got to do while you're on the clock.
Check Facebook for a couple hours.
Yeah.
Someone's got to pay for that.
And then just, to us too, there's a lot of hurry up and wait time too. Yeah. Like one instance we had maybe a month ago, we got called at like 6:30 in the morning and they're like, "We need you here now." And it's like, I was there by like 7:10 and I had 2 or 3 other guys show up like within 20 minutes of me getting there. And then next thing you know, like a detective comes out and he's like, "Dude, this is going to be like 4 more hours." And I was like, "All right, cool. We're going to go off to another job." But then we got that other job done because then there was like 4 of us there and we got that other job done in like an hour. And then we're all we literally went and staged in a parking lot. And I just told the guys, I'm like, "Hey, go get coffee, like hang out, play on your phones, like do whatever. Like we've got to be on this job as soon as it's released. We have to be there. So I'm not going to send us all back to the office. Like we're going to be within about 5 minutes of where we need to be. So as soon as they call, boom, we're there and, just hang out." But it's like, I'm paying them the whole time. I'm not billing that time out to the customer. I don't, want to, maybe they would have paid it, but at the same time, I'm not going to take advantage of it. I want to build relationships with people that they're like, "Hey, these guys treat us fair."
Yeah, not every job has to be a home run type of deal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What's the one thing I told myself I was going to for sure talk to you about briefly is the homeless camps. Mm-hmm. How did you get involved cleaning up homeless camps?
I wish you would have asked me that ahead of time so I could be prepared because I don't really remember. I would say, honestly, I think we just had a commercial client of ours call us.
It's like, hey, I got this property and I
Yeah, it
need
was like,
shit
hey,
cleaned up.
I've got all this shit all over the place.
I mean, is that
And then
typically private property when you're on it? Is somebody
yeah, the
owns
ones
it?
that we do are private property, so they're like developers or commercial real estate management companies. Because I remember our biggest homeless camp we did. That one came in as a referral from another guy that we had done these small ones for. These small ones like the size of this room, and it's like there's a bunch of shit scattered around. We go in, we've got some dump trucks, and the guys will go in with the dump truck, and they'll toss the shit in the dump truck and haul it to the landfill and take our photos showing completion, and we're done. And then we got called to this massive one. There was like over like 60 campsites, and I think we had like 6 or 8 dump truckloads of trash hauled away. Whole dump truck load of like bicycles and like scrap metal. I mean, like they had a whole damn like bike shop going on in this area. We had skid loader out there and thousands of urine bottles picked up and tent site, tents. And these are all areas that are homeless camps, houseless camps, however you want to call them, but they've all been cleared, so it's not like you went to the food shelter to go get some food and you came back and all your stuff's gone and thrown out. Like these people have been served by the police department and told that they can't be there, and this is all stuff that they've left behind because they didn't want to take it. And that's part of the problem with that situation that we clean up is people, a lot of people out there to paint a picture that these situations aren't harmful to people. These people are wanting to live this way, not, create harm to anybody, not do any damage. And it's like, well, wishful thinking. And some people are that way. Like they'll pack out what they, brought in. But the majority of what we see is, no, they're creating a mess. And a lot of this stuff is given to them from these charities and different organizations to where they got no skin in the game. Like if you give me this podium and I don't want it tomorrow, I'll leave it wherever it's at. Like it doesn't mean anything to me. It's not like I bought it or it was like gifted with like emotion type, seen as like an heirloom or something. And so, yeah, it creates that. And then we have needles and, a lot of drug use. And then, yeah, like the urine bottles and the feces buckets and all that stuff that you got to be able to pick up. And
interesting, man.
Yeah, so those are fun.
I just wanted to make sure
those are
I
different.
asked you about that towards the end here, but
yeah, I bet you we do 40 or so a year.
Damn.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
We have a couple contracts.
One every week and a half.
Yeah, we have a couple contracts with some management companies that the first week of the month, I do a rotation and I drive through and then just report back to them, hey, we found this and this and this. Do you want us to do anything about it? Sometimes they're like, yep, get on it. Sometimes they're like, no, let's wait till next week and see what happens. And, because some of them, it's like you move one person out and another person's like right back in that exact same spot. It's like, but it's ideal. It's like they've got the cover of the trees. They've got this nice little, area that's sheltering them that nobody's going to see them or they think nobody's going to see them. But it's like, I know right where you're at. We do sign postage and stuff like that we'll post signs, saying no trespassing and stuff like that. That way too, they can be trespassed. And, but
interesting, man.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I appreciate you for your time. I think, tying the military dynamic into your professional career, starting a business, again, obviously knowing you, I mean, you're just a fucking dude that goes. And, I don't know. I think if one person, listens to this and just like can relate in any way is always kind of my deal, right? That's the purpose of doing this is, somebody might have a tie, that is just like, goddamn, maybe today I'm going to go do something with my life or whatever, right? Whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
It's fun to have these conversations. And then selfishly, I tend to learn a lot, and then you gain a perspective, firsthand, especially with the military stuff, and then even business stuff though, that you can't get out of a textbook, that you can't, so much of our news that we consume is biased and trying to sway us one way or another. And sometimes it's just cool to have real fucking conversations and record them. So.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.